Good morning, everyone. How are you? Sorry about being late, but laundry duty took priority. G'day, Richard. Leonel, how are you, mate? From Toronto. What's the temperature like there? I've got my coffee. I actually had my coffee done a bit earlier, so it's actually becoming a bit cooler. Anyway, I have to wait for another 21 minutes. Not that I have to, but sort of 11 o'clock, I break the time restricted feeding. Sometimes, yeah. Maybe I should break it earlier. And just ignore the rules. Why not? Paul? Yeah, it's been a bit of a rough couple of weeks for me. Mira was sick. She was in hospital. Dad's had his issues. I'm going to see the doctor tomorrow with him. It's been a few issues happening in my life. Well, anyway. So I feel a bit ragged. And then in the office, everybody's down with some bloody ailment, coughing and sneezing like mad. A few with COVID, a few with the flu, a few with I don't know what, something new's going around at the moment. So last couple of weeks has just been so yeah, that's pretty much why I haven't been posting anything. Now I have got in the works a couple of videos. I've put all this. I'll be recording on Monday because I have a flex day. So seeing Dad going to his doctor in the morning, and then after that, when I get back after lunch, I plan to record that gut video, and that it'll take me a couple of days to process it all and all that. So it'll be later in the week, probably Friday or Saturday next week that'll actually come out. I've got a couple of other things that I'm actually working on as well. I've got one on the Inuit. So, I've had on the why Inuits can't go into ketosis. I've had a view which is a bit different than others on deuterium. I've jettisoned that. I actually think that was wrong. So completely throwing that away and come up with a new hypothesis, which I think is more plausible. So that's going to make things. I've got a new fasting video that's going to change the way people view fasting. So that'll radically change the whole thinking behind that. And that should create a lot of debating in the carnivore community about fasting. Once that comes out, it will really ruffle a lot of feathers so that's going to be quite interesting as well. So, somebody has to be controversial in this community, upset the apple cart with, something outside the box. Yeah, so I've got a few things planned. I just wish I had the time to do them earlier. So it's just I've been very busy with my own life and family and other things, and so yeah, it's been a bit all over the show. So I even need to get a bloody haircut. Look at just how long it is, and I've sort of brushed it down to keep it. It's really quite long, as you can see those hairs. So definitely needs to be sorted. Oh, and Richard just did a super chat for me. Oh, thanks, Richard. Probably pay for the haircut. Dollars adjusted. I'll probably need it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Question B12. High normal, long term, 802 thoughts. Look, I don't. If people, there are genetics that make people actually have higher levels, but these are blood tests, and if you're running much higher levels of that sort, I'd be doing a bit of investigation with the liver. So that's what I would basically be investigating, the actual to find out what's happening, in what state of affairs it is. So go and do one of those ultrasounds, and there's most doctors, naturopaths. I wouldn't go to an MD, but I'd go to a naturopath and get them to do like a full panel, to look at all the different enzymes, and possibly even you can actually do a bit of an ultrasound as well and check the liver out and see what state of affairs it is. Without actually looking at that, there are a lot of different possibilities, for, you may be low in other cofactors and not using enough. But to have these high serum levels, you're having storage problems in the liver. So why are you having storage problems in the liver? So I'd be investigating the liver as a priority personally. So okay, so your doctor suggests Gilbert syndrome. Yeah, that's a possibility. That is a possibility. Okay. Yeah, that is if you've actually already gone to the doctor and there's no joinders, there's no, your the markers that actually indicate that there is a liver problem, you know, then yeah, so that could be the situation. Oh, but you have to do a genetic. Haven't you done actually genetic tests? Have you gone on to onto basically Snippedia and actually checked in that regard? So the other thing that can actually cause an aggravation in terms of the Gilbert syndrome is with the bile ducts and the gallbladder. So people with the if you've got, you first have to find out whether you have the condition. Oh, no genetic testing, Harry. Okay, so if you don't know whether you have the condition, so you could do like a 23andMe or something like that to get a genetic test done, so you know where you are. But on the other hand, there's the other option that you can actually take, which is some naturopaths will do the specific test and look at for those genes and only those genes, and that can be done in a clinic, and usually can be done within a week. So because you're not actually checking a whole lot of sequences, you're only checking limited sequences, so it makes a big difference. There is research showing that taurine improves and choline also improve bile flow and actually reduce the effects of Gilbert syndrome. Now, the problem is these are in rats; they're not in humans. We don't have any human studies for weird reasons. You know how academia works. And they were in the megadose range, which normalized in the rats. So they actually these are transgenic rats that have been given the disease. They've been modified to have part of the human immune system and a few other things and all that. So that they're a strange animal model, and you can only extrapolate so much from it. But it's well worth a try to go into megadosing, and see what happens in that regard. So up to 4 grams when it comes to choline. So that's quite a lot in comparison to what you'd get even in the diet. Unless, well, if you were doing the 25 eggs a day like that old geezer was doing, you'd probably get to that range. I think it's the equivalent of 3.8, close to it. So yeah, so it didn't kill him. He was doing fine, and that does improve bile function And people that have got this syndrome tend to have that, and also tend to have certain other issues in their liver that choline helps in these mega doses. So people that usually have this syndrome and it's been confirmed, I usually ask them to try the choline pathway before trying meds and other things, and doing sort of mega dosing of short term, and then dropping it down to about the 10 mark in the grams for the taurine, and see whether that improves the situation. And then you go to the doctor, check to see whether there's an improvement or not by testing, and if that has sorted things out, because sometimes excess stuff like retinol and many other things can actually be excreted by the bile, so improving the gallbladder. And people that have got this condition, usually the gallbladder doesn't work as well, so you may not be excreting the stuff that you need to get rid of the excess. So that's another issue. So I would say I'd investigate that route, Richard, and hopefully you can find, you can get some improvement on that. Anyway, let me go back to the top. Find my spot, as they say. Oh, and there were my messages. And I'm going back to the other questions. I don't worry, Norman. And Troy says, to heck, no, actually, I put them in a spin cycle to dry them in the machine. So, no, not hanging. A special spin cycle. That's how lazy I am, Troy. And willing to spend a bit of money to get the machine to do the work. Do it, robot. Do it, slave. Yes. Anyway, Norman, how are you, mate? Good morning, Harry. Could you give a summary benefit of store-bought milk in Australia? Well, that's a big thing to say in Australia. There are a lot of differences between milk and in different parts of Australia. So let's just put that aside. Versus raw milk, if you can get it. Raw milk's always going to be superior. It's going to have all its vitamin C. It's going to have much higher lactoferrin. So lactoferrin, interferon, helps with the immune system, especially with a gut immune system. So milk is really good for the gut, raw milk. It will have more B vitamins. So it'll have a lot of different beneficial things that do get degraded with processed milk. So what happens with processed milk? Pasteurization, as an example. So with pasteurization, pretty much you can kiss goodbye all vitamin C. If you're on a pure carnivore diet, it's probably less of a problem, less of an issue, because you're going to have low blood sugar levels at a basal level. You'll only be taking in any small excesses from exercise or whatever through GLUT1, which doesn't require insulin, which means it leaves GLUT4 receptor completely open for vitamin C. And then you've got upregulation of intracellular antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalase. And glutathione plays a major role in recycling vitamin C and vitamin E. So you don't need as much on a carnivore diet or a species-appropriate diet compared to a plant-based diet, which requires far more of both those vitamins. Anyway, so we put that aside. Now, on the quality, what else do you potentially lose? Depending on whether it's whether it's been homogenized or not, or it's non-homogenized. If I was getting any store milk, I would accept that I'm not going to get any vitamin C. I'm going to get less B vitamins. I'm going to get substantially less lactoferrin. I'm going more for the macros, the macronutrients, fat, protein, and a bit of lactose sugar, as long as you can tolerate it. And if you're only having a couple of, 2 glasses of milk, even a liter of milk, you're probably going to get about less than 50 grams of carbohydrates. So you can still be ketosis, you can low grade ketosis. 2 glasses of milk, like half a liter, you'll be below 25 grams. That's ketosis. So it's what the Maasai do, about 2 glasses of milk with blood. And so they tend to be in this low grade ketosis. It doesn't affect them whatsoever. So it's a non-issue if people are concerned about that. Unless you're guzzling liters and liters and liters, which most people won't. It's just not going to happen. It's a non-issue even on that front. So my biggest concern is the damage to the fatty acids from homogenization. And then it varies. Different companies do different levels of homogenization. So if you go for the ultra high, that sort of in the cartons, that sort of milk, the ultra heated stuff and all that, that tends to be heavily heated, which ends up being macros, very little micronutrients, other than minerals. And because, you can't destroy minerals are minerals, as long as unless you lose them in the water, and that's not going to happen. It's part of the actual product. And so you pretty much will have a lot of far more damage to the actual fatty acids as a consequence of that. Not so much of the heating, because fats can actually tolerate a lot of heating, but once you homogenize them and break up the fatty acid sort of structures, that food matrix, they are more vulnerable to some oxidation and some damage. Not a lot, because let's not forget, there's very little PUFA and very little MUFA, medium chain, and sort of those medium chain type fats that have got one bond, double bond, and the PUFAs that have got 2 or 3 double bonds. They are more vulnerable to rancidity, oxidation, aldehydes, and things like that. So milk, like all dairy, is very high in saturated fats. So it tends to have very little. It'll still just it'll have trace levels. If you're on a carnivore diet, can your body actually, with the intracellular antioxidant systems and stuff like, can it deal with that? Possibly, more than likely. So it's probably not an issue, but you're adding additional stuff, negative stuff in there, that probably not a good idea. So I definitely wouldn't go for the ultra high. I'd give the homogenized stuff a miss. And if it's a cost or access issue, then I'd go for the non-homogenized milk. I'd go for like a dairy, like less of a big company. I'd go for like a smaller companies. Some of these smaller companies tend to not over pasteurize their stuff. They don't go really ultra high heat or anything like that. They use they do it over lot. It's also a cost for them, because they're doing less product, so they don't go crazy. But also it means that their product doesn't last as long on the shelf. And you actually notice these sort of craft ones, they're sort of small boutique type brands, tend to basically the amount of days they give you is less. And that's the other thing. You look at the days, and that will tell you how much pasteurization was actually involved. So a product that has more days that it can actually of shelf life, it means it was pasteurized at a much higher temperature. And that's the sort of way to gauge. Anyway, oops, I'll just cycle through these. You're an animal. How are you, mate? Yes, always with the insults. Johnny. Raw milk has more nutrition. Yes, yes. And many other benefits. Yes, he's our favourite troll, Carney troll. I must be dyslexic. I read fingers, fingertips. Mate, I'm dyslexic as well. That makes you smarter, apparently, what the research says. I don't know. I'll leave that for you guys to judge. I'm sold on milk. Was born on a dairy farm. There is nothing tastier than running your fingers along the cooling things of a dairy milk collection system. Okay, that is, if you get your kicks from that, good for you, Norman. You've excited you're an animal. Definitely. All the sexual connotations that are running through his mind, his little devious mind. He's probably laughing his head off. See, and you even got a response. Did you ever let a cow milk you? You're gonna love him. Oh, always on this channel. Oh, sure. Anyway. I have done some great videos on milk. Yes, I have. There was one in particular where he did a deep dive into the benefits, but I wasn't sure how the benefits transfer to store milk. Not a problem. Jordan have denied minister due to high heart rates. Could OMAD cause this? Overate protein a little. I think eating some oxalate later dropped my BM and around 10 points. I would say, look, some people tend to, like my sister, for instance, my younger sister, her blood pressure really drops quite a bit. She has to do 2 meals. She can't do OMAD. She's always had a low blood pressure issue for years. So there's a lot of different things. And so I say to people that there could be a lot of reasons for causing, high heart rate as well. So there's not one reason as only. It could be electrolyte issues that can cause a high heart rate. It could be oxalate causing a reduction in sulfur amino acids like taurine. Could be over, burning through them, because it does. And taurine actually regulates the ions and calcium channels. There could be a calcium issue that also raises blood sugar and also can cause some arrhythmia issues as well if it's deranged or whatever. So 24% of people have those genetics. I did that video on, why some carnivores get higher blood sugar, but also they can get some derangements in heart rate because if calcium isn't properly regulated, does act as it can actually affect calcium channels like taurine and actually affect it in such a way to be a natural calcium channel blocker. You need a certain level gradient of calcium inside the cell, but not too much. And most of it should be in the bloodstream. So there can be derangements there that can actually cause things of that sort. So there can be a lot of drivers in that regard. If you've got confirmed oxalate, I would definitely up my calcium intake. That would be a priority. So there are many sources of calcium. Dairy is probably the easiest one for most people. In particular, cheeses that are high in calcium are one of the easiest to get in for most people. So that's one way of going. If you're not really into dairy, there's sardines or another option, bone broths. There's all these other things. There are ionized trace minerals, which you can actually get ones with slightly higher calcium. quantity in them. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of different options out there in that regard. I always remind people, do not go for the standard calcium, stuff out there that's problematic. It doesn't have the right ionic sort of, and it won't bind to the receptor sites properly. You do have calcium receptor sites in your gut, which are vitamin D dependent. So, there's all these sort of things. So try and get it from food. That's what we're meant to do. Just get it more from the sources that we need in that regard. But there could be a lot of drivers. You have to play around, or consult with somebody like Bart Kay or whatever, and play around with those factors and see how it goes, or drop me an email. A lot of things. It's hard to look on a live stream. It's really hard to diagnose people. You really have to basically do a consultancy and go through and discuss a whole lot of things about their diet, their history, symptoms. So there's a lot of things that, I'm just giving you just some, this is not medical advice. I'm just giving you some general things in these sort of Q&As. They're not specific to, they may not be applicable to you, Jordan. So just keep that in mind. So because, just go back to John, because you just can't do it in a live stream. It's not a practical thing to do. I would love to, but it's not a practical thing to be able to do. And, it's just the way it is. Anyway, let's move on. Why isn't this my chat thing? It froze. Okay. What the hell is it doing? Do you know much about fluoroquinone? Is that an antibiotic? I think it is. And one might be able to... I don't know enough about this specific brand. I've heard about it, but, high amounts of different antibiotics affect different strains. Some can actually affect your lactobacillus to a larger extent. Others can actually affect your bifidobacteria to a larger extent. There are a lot of variations, and off the top of my head, I can't remember all the different variations and which exact strains die off more because of certain antibiotics. So, yeah, but I'd have to like check the toxicology of it and find out exactly what effects pharmacokinetics it has in the gut, to remind myself which exact strains may be affected. I do intend of making a series probably later in the year, not now, looking into the different effects on different sort of strains of bacteria. I've had a few people that I've had to deal with that have lost certain strains of bacteria and they needed to restore them. Now there's people who are losing a lot of bifidobacteria due to COVID, and the jab, but also COVID, the spike. So that's an interesting area, and that's a problem for a lot of people because bifidobacteria is one of the biggest groups in the gut, and it can actually cause massive derangements. So are we going to get COVID-related massive derangements in gut microbiome in the future? I don't think so. I think it's going to be more people that have got compromised immune systems or weaker immune systems, which is probably a large part of the population, at least 50%, who are on very poor diets, and very inappropriate diets, and not getting enough nutrition and probably not getting enough sun to support their immune system, good vitamin D status. So it's a lot of a lot of things to digest and pull apart. But look, yeah, at this stage, I couldn't give you a straight answer on this particular antibiotic and what it will affect more than others. I'd have to check it up. I'd have to look it up to remind myself. It's a long time since I looked into the bacterial strains and antibiotics. That was about 10 years ago. So I can't remember everything back then. I know about it, but yeah. Nobody's ever asked me a question like that. Anyway. Yes, but don't expect a video anytime soon. I've got a raft of videos that I've got a big backlog, let's put it that way, for a lot of things that I want to get out there. Anyway, sodium phosphate added to bacon, an issue. Some say causes kidney issues and calcification, etc. No, not really. I actually say to them, provide me a mechanistic study showing that happens. They can't. Provide me a study that actually shows that there's an association, Johnny, but that's all there is. So they can say whatever they like. They can say that sunspots affect hair growth, but it's not going to be the case unless there may be an association for some people, but still it's an association. Are more likely to get eaten by a shark than basically have kidney failure due to eating bacon with sodium phosphate in it. So, yeah, bullshit, basically. Actually, there's a study that I do show a study where because nitrates, it's all the same sort of stuff. There's a study where I show where they induce cancer in a rat. There's one of my videos that I've actually made, and I think it was one of the PUFA series, and they actually give the rat bacon, just pure bacon, nothing else, just bacon, processed, bacon, your regular supermarket shit, and it inhibited the growth of colon cancer in the rat. A mechanistic study. Not with any other confounding shit to create false associations, which they love to then adjust in epidemiology. So let's put all this other crap in, and then we'll adjust it. And even when you do an experimental, the design of the experimental research is very important. What else have you included? Oh, Randall cycle activation. So you've included sugar, multidextrose, you've included seed oil, canola oil or something like that, plus a bit of lard. And obviously it's the animal product that's at fault here, not the other crap that you've put in there as well for that experiment. So there's a lot of that sort of nonsense and all that. And so, as I said, the only thing that I've actually seen, like an animal studies, a couple of them related to bacon and commercial bacon, it's actually had positive effects on the little buggers. So, I'll let you make up your mind about that. So I say to those people making those claims, because I just say I don't know. We don't have any experimental evidence. But those people making those claims need to provide the evidence. If they can't provide the evidence, they should stop making those claims, because then we should classify them as crackpots and idiots, because they are making claims that they can't support with evidence. They can have an opinion. I don't care. It's like assholes. Everybody has one. But, just too much crap comes out of these people's mouths, which is unfortunate. So, do I actually consume bacon which is smoked and nitrate free and organically grown and all that? Yes, I do, but I can afford it. Other people can't. And I'm not going to deny them good animal nutrition and take a pompous position in that regard. So, especially when I don't have any evidence to show there is a contraindication. Yes, let's move on. Hard logic. Amazing content across the board. In the works, I hear. Yes, there is a few things that will rattle a lot of cages out there, especially the fasting one, I suspect, will rattle quite a few. I love to rattle people's cages. Yes, get the animals all excited and stressed. And so, yes, so that'll be in the works. And the Inuit one is, I actually came up with that. I was having a bath with a bit of Epsom salts in it, and I was just relaxing, and I just had the epiphany. I said, "Oh shit! How did I didn't realize that earlier? You dummy!" I said to myself, because it was so obvious, So yeah, you'll actually see where once I actually do make the video, you'll go, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." I've actually already made the video, but I'm going to make it again. And I actually put it, it's got a date thing, but I actually don't like, because it doesn't cover the other part. It covers part of it, but not all of it. And I missed out some stuff that I wanted to include. I like completeness to complete my argument in such a way where very few people can argue against it after. So I need to add a bit more evidence to my argument, to my hypothesis, which I think is a really good one. But anyway, that's for the future. Jay. Oops. Oh, what did I do now? Okay. Sometimes it actually just froze for a sec. My mouse. That's a problem with StreamYard. You click in the wrong spot and it just goes, haywire. G'day, Jay. Thanks, mate. Deborah, how are you? Oh, well, there'd be no excitement to it, would there? As Dad says. Well, if everything was normal, it shows that you've got character. And I go, yeah, Dad, whatever. Dad's a bit, he's very old school. He's sort of, tough enough, get over it, move on, stop complaining. He's very much like that. That's how I grew up, with a dad that just basically, you'd go and say, oh, this happened. And I said, and grow a spine, get on with it. So, it's where I get this attitude. I've picked up his bloody attitude. He's, condescending, just telling people to get on with it and stop complaining. So not that it's easy psychologically inside it, let's be honest. You go, oh God, so you can say it, but mentally, sometimes you go, oh, fuck. Yeah. Anyway, life is interesting. Thoughts on BPC 157, that is, peptide therapy. I actually have ordered some. It should be in late next week. I should get 3 bottles. I'm using 2 on the old man, and I'm using 1 myself out of curiosity. So we'll see how any personal research or experience Bart is partaking. Yes, I know Bart is partaking. There's a lot of mixed research out there. It seems to do a number of things. It has some anti-clotting features and also can heal the endothelium. So Dad's actually, because of, doing the jabberoo thing, which he shouldn't have done, against my wishes. Anyway, he has those clotting things. The swelling has reduced quite a bit, but not enough. There's still quite a bit there still left. There's still some clotting factors. He forgot to remind me to order lubrikinase, and I have ordered now for him. I thought he still had some, and he didn't tell me. Bloody hell, old man. So that was annoying. So I said, why didn't you tell me? This was last week. And he goes, I forgot. What do you mean you forgot? This is really important to clear out the clots. So anyway, so I've got some ordered from from Amazon. So they're coming in these BPC ones also, because I've got Prime, so I've used that. And I do order for other people, including Hello Kitty, and I just noticed her there. Hello Kitty. I got her some stuff that she wanted. Yeah, so got those, and we're going to test them on the old man and see how they go. And I'll be able to sort of, so I don't have any personal experience, and I don't have any experience with any other person taking them. The only person that I know that's taking them is Bart. And so I've been, even though I've been aware of a number of these peptides, there's a lot of them, not only these, there's a number of others. There's this other one as well that I'm sort of looking at, but I haven't made up my mind. I'm sort of not lukewarm. Yeah, well, to be honest, I am lukewarm about their claims in that regard. But at the same time, I'm investigating to see whether I can amplify their effects. It's like, for instance, the Physatin. It is a senolytic, but you know what? It's really poorly absorbed. So they claim that it does a lot, but but then if you consume it with, you take it out of the capsules, you put it in cream, you consume it with cream, so it's doused in cream, so it's very fat because it absorbs better with fat. So use cream to really increase the absorption rate. In that regard, make sure that you've got good vitamin D status, that all the receptor sites are working properly and all that. And so those are the sort of things that I do. And then use taurine to amplify it at night to, I think it's based on that research that I showed in one of the videos, about 680%, because we want to maximize the senolytic effect. I'm now investigating some of these peptides myself to see whether they can be sort of synergies. I'm not going to talk about it at this stage because I'm still doing investigations in that area. And once I've worked out synergies, amplification, protocols, and how to get the best out of them, because sometimes combining them with other things, you can actually make them work better in the body and get more out of it, more bang for your buck, so to speak. So that's something that I'm looking at, because, one, you save money, which is important. But on the other hand, beyond just saving money, you're actually getting a more bang for your bucks. And I like that approach to everything I do. Anyway, yes, that's what it is. Oops. Good morning to you. So when do you fly out? I know you're in Melbourne at the moment. Are you flying out tomorrow or for Hong Kong, or so what's happening? Anyway, let's move on. Let me know. Send me a message, because you didn't tell me exactly your itinerary, remember? Troy, your upcoming fasting video, can you provide a quick precursor? No, nothing, zero. Maybe less favorable than many do. Nothing to do with that. Completely nothing to do with that. It's a different way of, anyway, I don't want to go into it. Stop asking questions like that, Troy. Go away. Busybody. Scotty, how are you? On my phone today. Good morning, folks. So you're kicked out of home. Is that what you're telling me, Scotty? G'day, Lucas. How are you, mate? Got me hyped up for his week next video. Oh, yeah, that's right. It'll become, yes, you can expect a lot of conversations in the Discord. Yeah, can you actually put the Discord in the chat box, Lukey, so people can actually know where to go and have conversations? Yes, yes. Throw a few furry cats in there to really upset the apple cart. That's the way to do it. Just see the tension rise amongst the animals. Stuff like that. I better have a bit of coffee just to sort of energize myself. I think you've actually answered your own. This is about your dad. You've answered your own question. You know, your dad needs to make a lot of changes, which we've already discussed privately. Yeah. So if he's not prepared to make those changes, he's going to be suboptimal. You know, you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet. There's no way of doing it. And we've discussed this before. So, you know, obviously doing things like, you know, some weightlifting, doing all these sort of things, yeah, they all help improve. So, but at the end of the day, he needs to make some radical changes to his life. Anyway, if you do come on, we can actually chat after privately. Anyway, or drop me a line. Dean, how are you? Good morning. Yes. How is things in the land of the rising sun? Yes, mate. Glad to have you here. Nomad. Illy PJ. Okay. So you wear PJs? Hi, Harry. Is it possible when moving from Ireland to live in a coastal area, a person can receive too much iodine? Anything's possible. Different environments have different levels of mineralization in the soil, and you can actually have different exposures to different things within the environment. Even coastal areas will have differences in a lot of things. Some coastal areas will have like more wind, and this wind can actually pick up a number of different particles. And so the actual air itself can be higher in certain, you know, trace minerals and stuff like that. Some people can have, this can cause them some lung issues, depending on what those minerals are. So there's, you know, some people living close to areas like salt lakes and stuff like that. And sometimes there can be certain minerals, and so that can affect them. So there's, you know, unless you'd have to basically, the best way to do it would be to ask for from your local government, you know, in your area, for an environmental report on, you know, minerals and many other things in your locality. They, you know, especially if you're in North America, they more than likely would have those environmental files, and you can actually check them. We've got them here in Tasmania, stuff like that, so you can actually check stuff. And even we map some of that stuff as well within our environmental layers. So we actually map some of that stuff and put it online, so we can provide that information. And maybe it's online, you know, in you know, sort of a geographical, you know, cartographical mapping sort of product online system. I don't know, or maybe it's just a file with where they've actually just got, they've got like different localities where they've actually done environmental assessment, and that may have that information. So you'd have to yeah, go to your local authority and get the information. It may be online. Just check, see whether you get lucky. If it's not, go to their offices and make a request. Anyway, yeah, how are you? Hi, Harry. Can't watch right now. That's fine. You can always watch later on, because I'm at work. But I wanted to drop in and say hi. Hope you are doing well. Thank you. I'm doing well. It's other people in my family that aren't doing as well, that have, let's say, taxed my time and possibly, you know, mentally tired me as well. So yeah, anyway. Shit happens. But thanks for dropping in and saying hello. You're welcome, mate. You're welcome. Nathan, how are you, mate? Very rugby league to you and yours and all right thinking people. Same to you, mate. Kefir made with raw milk versus kefir made with pasteurized milk. Obviously, raw milk's going to be better than pasteurized. But if pasteurized is only what you have, use pasteurized. So, so in that regard, I've actually got some. Actually, I'm babysitting Kefir for Hello Kitty while she's away, and so I'm doing Kefir at the moment, whether I like it or not. So I actually put a bit extra milk in it. Actually, it's grown exponentially. Okay, I've had a bit of an overgrowth on the Kefir side. Hello Kitty. So sorry about that. I'll sort something out. I'll straighten it out and because it does good all. So did our ancestors eat a lot of eggs? Depends. Varied between populations. Island populations have been known to consume more eggs. Savanna populations less. It depends on the population and locality of that population. So eggs isn't a food that it's a food we've probably consumed more within civilization. So in the last 10,000 or less than 10,000 years, probably 8,000 years. Prior to that, it would have been more seasonally, more now and then when it's available. Obviously, it's the breeding seasons when there's going to be more eggs available rather than all year round. We've actually domesticated animals to produce chickens, to produce eggs all year round. In the natural environment, it's more seasonal. You don't get as many eggs all year round. That doesn't mean that people haven't consumed them, and people have consumed them in vast and large quantities as well. Some, and even that person who has North America, that has that American old geezer that was consuming 25 eggs a day for multiple decades, didn't affect him in any way, had no sensitivity to eggs, and was consuming a vast array and had genetics from the British Isles. So it didn't have any specific genetics of people living on islands in the Pacific or in other parts of the world where there's higher consumption, and still didn't have any negative effect on it. I think a lot of the modern, these sort of food sensitivities are more to do with, this guy the research was done back in 91 or around there. We're talking about quite a long time ago, 30 odd years ago, plus more than 30 odd years. So we're talking about a time when, people weren't as deranged and were still consuming more animal foods than people are today. At that stage, they were sort of 50-50. Some for 40. Now it's like 25, 75 plants, most plant-based, even the general community. So people have got far more health derangements than they had back then. And so, is this tolerance due to, modern derangements of glyphosate actually acting as a low-grade antibiotic and deranging the gut microbiome of most people, that the reason why people have a lot of these sensitivities that they didn't back then? There's a whole lot of reasons, but I don't see eggs as a problem at all if you can tolerate them and you don't have any sensitivities. How many you eat? As much as you like, as much as you want to. That's your business. And our ancestors only consumed them seasonally. and in Africa was ostrich eggs and stuff like that. I mean, they still use ostrich eggs to put water in from plants, which they, which is low deuterium because it's the photosynthetic effect. And they carry this around, especially the Bushmen of the Kalahari, the sand people. So I mean, yeah. Anyway, so of that is that. I heard pasteurized milk was missing some digestive enzymes and all that. Well, yes, that's true. But at the end of the day, not a lot. There's still some that actually survive, even the pasteurization. But, obviously milk has a slightly higher pH. So some of these, as it's going through the stomach, if you're not consuming it with, if you consume milk with meat and you create a lot of high acidity, you're probably going to break down most of these enzymes are not going to survive anyway. A very high acidic stomach, a very low pH, so it's pretty much irrelevant. And luckily, we do have a pancreas that can actually produce more than enough digestive enzymes for us to digest our food. So we don't really have to worry about that in that regard. And we also generate digestive enzymes in the mouth as well. So it's right through. Some do survive. Not all of them get wiped out, depending on the pH of the stomach. But even at very low pHs, but much less. But that would be a deal breaker for me, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So, and there are variations to that theme. That's the problem with science. It's never, it's a gradient. It's never this exactly. Yes, it must be that quantum fuzziness. Yes, damn quantum fuzziness. Yes. Ted loves that fuzziness. It's, it's probably part of his new theory that he's coming up with on the fuzzy hair theorem. Yes. I shouldn't say anything bad about him because, or contradict his theory because he may come at night. Evil little bear. That's what happened to you're an animal. It's Ted. Invite winning Eddie. Question: I have chronic congestion news. Is it allergy? Will vitamin D help? It has been shown to help. And also some people, it's a strange thing with sulfur amino acids, or sulfonic acids like taurine, can help some, others not at all. So it's a really strange. But vitamin D tends to, if you've got a good vitamin D status, that tends to help quite a bit. But with, also, people trying to get a bit more lysine in their diet. So lysine has also been associated. So some people get they'll use an iodine as well, spray into the nose. So there's a couple of things that people do in that regard. So give those a bit of a try and see how you is. Yes, that would be a long, long conversation. I'll leave that for another day. It's an expensive way. Obviously, taurine actually improves the regulation of your gut microbiome, and and taking B vitamins is really important. having a good vitamin D status. The B vitamins actually are exchanged by bifidobacteria strains. So you've got to have in there. The question is, have you lost all your bifidobacteria or not? I couldn't tell you. You'd have to go and do a panel, a test, Johnny, and actually check to find out, do you have I'm trying to think what there's a name for it. But anyway, you do a panel and work out what types of species you have. I wouldn't. You can do a detailed one which actually looks at all the different strains of your gut microbiome. It's a bit more expensive. Is it necessary? Maybe not. You really want to know what the quantity of bifidobacteria as a percentage within your gut. Bifidobacteria should be the most dominant. If it's not, you got issues. I've actually done, on my myths and falsehoods of veganism, I actually cover this, where Firmicutes, you still need Firmicutes, which is the other big group, but if you have more Firmicutes and bifidobacteria, you get inflammation in the gut. And if you have less Firmicutes and more bifidobacteria, you get the opposite. The inflammatory markers go down. And animal foods actually increase bifidobacteria, where plant foods increase Firmicutes, and in particular Prevotella. And Prevotella is one that the vagoons go crazy about because it's associated with certain things. But when you actually look at mechanistic studies, they actually show that it actually increases a number of the inflammatory interleukins. And I do show that in my myths and falsehoods of veganism, to point that nonsense out to them, because associated studies cannot infer or prove causality. So they're only associated nonsense, and usually adjusted nonsense. So it's crap. Yes, unfortunately. Dr. What's her name? Sabrine. Freaking hell. I recently saw a video Elliot had a couple of weeks ago. Let me just spell it out. Hazan or something like that. Dr. Sabrine Hazan. I think it's spelled Hazan. Hazan. I think. I can't remember. It is 2 weeks. I had a lot in my life happening. So she actually has done some experimental work and looked into and done some research work, and shown that bifidobacteria takes a big hit from the Jabiru, and to some extent also from the spike in the, so anyway, yes, speaking of the Jabiru, did you know how long our body stopped producing? Oh, we don't actually. The longest research is a couple of months, and that actually still showed that it was still happening in some people. So we don't know. Obviously, somebody who's got a weaker immune system can't clear it out. It seems that a large part of the population today are vitamin D deficient, which affects their immune system. When the immune system is attacked multiple times, it actually becomes senescent. That means less able to, it ages. It's the reason why cytokines increase and naive T cells decrease. Naive T cells is what young people have, like children when they're born, and have very few inflammatory or very few T cytokines. So these T cells that are more older tend to produce cytokine signaling, and tend to also cause greater derangements because they get overexpressed. And so as a consequence, things really go pear-shaped in people's bodies. And usually it's not the disease, but the over sort of production of cytokines in the body that actually usually kills people. So it is a problem that if these are circulating in the system and not breaking down. Now, some of these lubrockinase and some of the nattokinase, if you're not taking any drugs, so you can actually go on nattokinase, which is cheaper, that does go around breaking up some of these enzymes. You take them in the morning on an empty stomach, they do seem to break up a lot of this sort of stuff. So, yeah. It's one way of doing it, but they modify that. Was it that lab job? So it wouldn't basically it'd stay in the system for a bit longer. Yeah. But we were told by our lovely friends at Big Pharma that wasn't the case. They were designed to break down very quickly within just a couple of days. Really? So what the hell are they around months later? Give us a break. Yeah, it's pretty much nonsense. Anyway, can someone send me a list of studies that basically prove we are hypercarnivores? Just want to read it, thanks. I don't need to. There is no studies showing that we are hypercarnivores. There is no studies that showing that we're vegans. There is no studies that we're anything, omnivores or whatever. In nutritional research, such studies don't exist. We don't have people locked in labs for all their life, or prisoners for all their life, being put on different diets to see which one will affect them in different ways and all that. But we do have archaeological evidence, which is completely different from the research in physiology and nutrition, because we don't have any such studies, Alberto. They don't exist. What we have is a whole lot of associated claptrap and nonsense out there. So the actual studies are based on the N15 data. I've talked about it. So has Bart. He's actually done videos about it. I've discussed it in a lot of my live streams. And it's pretty much that before agriculture existed on the planet, and in the glacial periods, which was the majority of our existence, so for the last 300,000, 350 odd thousand years, even a bit more longer than that, it's about close to about well over 1 million years, we've lived in a glacial period with 2 interglacial periods. So we're talking about glacial period, which frost all the way down to the tropics. So forget about finding any plants in that environment. Even the animals had to dig with their to eat the grass that's under the snow or under the frost. So very little, it was primarily green plants. That's it. Something that we don't consume. And everything modern is all domesticated. So it didn't even exist then. Even in the interglacial periods, there was a bit of fruit seasonal and a bit of tubers, and that's about it. Very fibrous tubers, which we sucked out some of the stuff that even tribal people like the Hudsons do today. So in that regard, and they are still considered super carnivores because they still primarily consume mostly animal foods, mostly meat, and it's only seasonally that they consume some of this other stuff. So they're still at least 2/3, if not 70% carnivore. So that's classified as super carnivore, anything over 70%. Hyper carnivore is anything over 85%. And, and so for most of our existence, we've been in that hyper carnivore state or excessively hyper carnivore, because we've got N15 data in the archaeology showing that our level of carnivory was even higher than Arctic foxes, wolves, and stuff like that, which are known carnivores. So our N15 data was ultra high in those glacial periods. So pretty much we're just eating animals, and probably medicinally using some of the sugar, some of the actual green plants, because in those glacial periods there wasn't a lot, very little, So that's the only research we do have, which is the N15 data and nothing else. And the N15 data now has it combines with, it's not only in the nitrogen. So plants have nitrogen 14. When you eat plants and you get protein from plants, you will have higher levels of N14. Our ancestors were all super high in N15, which you can only get by eating protein from an animal. It has to be from an animal because it has a completely different isotope structure, and that's the reason we know that it comes from a different thing. There's only one bark tree that does have high isotope. It's one of those rare things in nature, and an antelope that actually consumes it tends to have higher, but that also eats grass, so it also has high levels of N14 and N15 plus, so it's a bit strange, but it has much lower of the carbon sort of markers, where we've got super high the carbon markers, which is the delta 13, which shows that we're eating ruminant animals, because only a grass eating animal can give us that. And then we've also got the recent zinc of the teeth enamel of our ancestors. So the zinc stuff confirming that, because plants have very little zinc, it's definitely the source of the food was coming from animals to have high zinc. So that's all we have is archaeological evidence. We have drawings in caves and drawings around where our ancestors show the hunt. They don't show plants, they show the hunt. And we've also got, we don't see plants depicted on frescoes until we actually have civilization. That's when we actually see them. Prior to that, the only thing we see is animals being depicted and hunted in both cave drawings and drawings on rocks and stuff like that. They're all related to the hunt and nothing else. And also we have fires, that, and a lot of bones around those fireplaces where our ancestors lived. So there is comprehensive archaeological evidence to show that we were super hyper carnivore at different periods of our speciation. So for the majority of our existence, Alberta, that's what we consumed. It's only been the last, agriculture really started at about 3,500 BC with tillage. Prior to that, we still hunted a bit. We still had domesticated animals and stuff like that. Agriculture did not really take off. We had some plants in our diet, but not a lot, even at that stage, because you just didn't have tillage to get productivity. But once we got tillage, which was the Sumerians, and we're talking about now, it was around about, this was in the later part of the Sumerian societies, the middle part of the Sumerian societies, that we have, tillage developing fully, and then slowly starting to get into other societies in the region of the Middle East and elsewhere, and some of that knowledge getting to other parts of the world. Now, rice doesn't require tillage because they just they stick it into the actual, in areas where they flood them. So it's a completely different method. So it doesn't require tillage, the soil. It's a different method. But for the Middle East, for grains, required tillage to really ramp up that production to get more plants in people's diet. And that was about 3,500 years ago. So it's about, from today, we're talking about 5,500 years ago, which is nothing in the history of our species. Most of the evolutionary changes and our genetics evolved at a time when there were none of these plants whatsoever. So zilch. And Bart's actually made a couple of videos, and he's actually put a link for the all you have to do is just Google the N15 and you'll find the primary study. I may actually stick it. Look, at the end of this video, I will stick it in the actual chat, the comments of this video once it's actually, and I'll actually pin it. So you can, Alberto, you can go and look at the study and you can actually read it. So the study does exist. Anyway, hi Harry. G'day Michael. Seen an old video with Bart about carbon 12 and 13 and greenhouse gases are the cause the patsy for the shell oil industry and any further information. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's the one that's on the Odyssey site, because he used to have a lot of these things on the YouTube, but he had to take them off because YouTube were trying to shut down his channel, basically. So he had to move all and remove all these controversial issues, like, you know, about the greenhouse and all these things. And so that's why that video ended up on Odyssey. So if people want to see that old video that I did with him, it's there. And that's a study which I downloaded. The area where I work, we're members of the Geoscience Australia, and so we've got access to these studies. And many others, because it covers a lot of gamut in spatial science. So we've got access to these things, and so I was able to download back then when it just had come out, and read it and go, oh, this is interesting. And it actually quite clearly shows that, these animals would definitely are not the problem, because, the isotope that they produce is going down. And I think I provided, I can't remember whether in that video I provided or in another video that I've actually done with him about, I think it may have been another video, but I can't remember now. It's so long ago. But I do provide in a video where I show how many animals, like head of cattle, we have nowadays. For instance, back in the 70s, it was, that's the period when they were saying we're heading for an ice age. And the temperature since the 30s was actually declining. Even the carbon dioxide was going up, completely not following. What's wrong with carbon dioxide? Bad boy. It's not enough you're demonized and you're bad. On top of that, you don't follow the rules. You go down from the 30s to the 70s, and then crackpots have to adjust the earlier data because we didn't have enough data points. So let's just add some bullshit in there to adjust it so we can actually show that it's been rising forever, which is not. And that's why they were saying back then, we're heading for an ice age. And then it started warming, and they go, oh, we need to jump on a different bandwagon, because that's not going to get us any funding if we say that sort of stuff. Now we're heading to, so back then it was mad. Let's basically put like this sort of these compounds on the ice in the Arctic in order to prevent the reflection. So water would absorb and the ice would absorb more, solar radiation, so it could actually melt the ice and actually increase the temperature to prevent the ice age from coming. And then when it naturally just did the natural variation, they go, oh, we have to change the theme because we're not going to get money for this. So they changed quite quickly. There's a lot of science has been really compromised in the modern, especially the last couple of decades. See, what happened was up until the 1970s, all funding was public. That means a scientist was just getting money. They just did their research. It was actually divvied up amongst all the institutions quite equally. And so scientists didn't have to fight. After that, with the Reaganomics and the Thatcherism, they sort of sent them on their way and they had to fight and all that. So basically they politicized science because then these scientists had to compromise the message that they were putting out there in order to get the funding. And this goes across the board. Happened in nutrition much earlier with Ansel Keys and all that after the Second World War, where a lot of things were slowly eroded. But in the other fields, it happened in the 80s and 90s and all that. And it's funny how all these academics now, once they become emeritus professors or they leave academia, then they spill the beans and become all so-called deniers. They always knew it was bullshit. But they had to toe the party line to get the funding and just kept their mouths shut. They still did, some of them did not too bad research, but they never argued. You know, they always made out, they talked about their data showing this. They focused in a narrow way. So somebody had to be an expert in that field to be able to get that research, and then they end up out of academia or retired, and then they go, oh, I did say this and I did show that this was the case and that. Well, why would you say? Because they weren't prepared to put their head on the block. Because the problem is, if they do, just look at what happened to Jordan Peterson. He disagreed with them, and what do? They've gone after him. Like, that's what political bullying is. And we live in an era of political bullying, and it's really hard for good scientists to actually do stuff where they feel confident they can put it out and say, yep, no, this is the case. And it's like the bullshit that they actually made up after the Challenger disaster. There was a sort of a satellite that was up there that was being calibrated every 12 days. And the engineer, this retired engineer, said, no, we'll calibrate it every day. And the crackpots, what did they said? Oh, the data was not... they say the opposite. Oh, it wasn't actually calibrated really well, and that's why the measurements of the solar radiation weren't taken properly, and so we need to extrapolate and adjust, and they do these adjustments to basically push their narrative. And the people, if you take a look, who are they? These people are ex-hippies. They're usually plant-based academics, and they are really politically motivated to, and this is how they justify it. It's like, religious organizations sometimes in the past have justified certain things because it's for your own good, will lie, or certain parts of the elites say, well, people could never understand it, so we have to lie to them in order to convince them to do things because it's for their own good. Well, really? You think we can't work it out ourselves? It's really, yeah, that's the sort of world we live in. Unfortunately, in the last couple of decades, things have been completely severely compromised on that front. And it's because of money, and yeah, it's only when they, as I said, when they come out of academia, do they say the opposite. And this is the sort of nonsense. And this study should have gone worldwide, this study, showing quite clearly that ruminant animals are part of the carbon cycle, and ruminant carbon from all ruminants, that means wild and domestic, has been going down. Because you know why it's going down from the wild as well? It's because the domestic are quite stable, the numbers in the last. It's the wild life that's being lost. Guess why the wildlife is being lost? Because we're growing kibble. They're cutting down all these forests to grow soy and canola and all this other shit. Exactly. That is why, because they want to transition us to we've got arid farming land, or land that is low quality. You can't use it for basically for plants, to grow plants. You need good soils. You need flat land so tractors can go over. You've got these rocky areas and all that. They're perfect for ruminant animals. And there's a lot of land like that, pasture land, that is actually being degraded at the moment. Pasture land around the world is being degraded because there's less wildlife, and there's less domestic animals replacing that wildlife because we're not increasing, which we could provide high quality protein to all the world's population. And that also, those ruminant animals living on there were more in the past than today. So the isotopes were much higher in the past than what they are today. Now we've changed. So, and that worked quite well as part of the carbon cycle with the animals. What have we done now? We've removed all these animals from our, to grow soy and that sort of shit. And then they point the finger at the cow. It's absolutely nonsense. G'day, Lukey.
Hello, Harry. How are things? Nice to be here once again.
Always good, always good. So what's happening in Brazil? You got cutting down the Amazon to grow more soy and for the buoyant population of North America?
Quite a bit, actually, but the destruction of the Midwest to supply China with soy is rather rather terrible.
Ah,
But
yes,
yeah,
those commies love their soy. They couldn't do without it.
and
They lather their bodies with soy.
it just drives me crazy because there's like a swampy area like towards Paraguay, and so south central type of area.
And it's
And
beautiful pasture land down there in
yes, and
Paraguay
that's,
and
if you
Uruguay.
guys ever buy grass-fed beef from Brazil, it's likely coming from there. It's an amazing place. And
Exactly.
People think that you just have to destroy it all to like grow cattle. No, they just release the cattle there. It's fantastic.
Exactly. Move them around with the dogs. Woof,
Yep.
woof, move. Or with cowboys, on horse,
Exactly.
moving them,
Yeah,
moving them
that's
around
where
from
the Brazilian
one pasture
cowboys.
to another. Yeah, from one pasture to another.
Yep.
I mean, we've been doing this for thousands of years. It's normal, it's not as if, it's only in the last 40, 50 years that we've seen this massive loss. And what's happened? What's the difference? We've abandoned animals. We've reduced the amount of domesticated animals. And what we've grown in their place, is plants. Plants, you have to literally kill everything, cut the forest down, sterilize the soil from everything, because everything could be a potential enemy, then spray it with all sorts of chemicals to make sure that no pest can actually emerge and all that. And all this poison that goes into the actual into these, then even birds that feed on these, they die. We're having massive loss of because of the the plant-based community growing, or we're turning the general community into a plant-based community, and we're seeing massive loss of wildlife being exposed. One, losing their habitats. Two, losing their food source, or their food source being contaminated heavily by a number of these very dangerous chemicals that are sprayed. You don't need to spray chemicals on cows. They just go out there and eat grass. They munch away.
But by the way, Harry, I don't know if you've been keeping up with a few news more local to me, but the free speech situation here isn't exactly good right now. I actually couldn't use, if this was like 2 weeks ago, a Telegram we couldn't use it for like 3 days on end. It came from the Supreme Court. It was
Shit.
just a bunch of BS. Yeah. And they were saying they were going after Discord next, but nothing happened yet. It is actually a bit concerning, and there's even a law proposal for certain restrictions on speech on the internet, and I'm not going to say much. It's just nonsense.
Da Silva's just such a champion for human rights, such a champion for basically freedom of speech and the rule of law, and all these things. Such a left-wing believer in the rights of others, as long as those people agree with him.
Right? Look, I don't know if there's any compatriot watching right now, but if you voted for the current guy, well, let's just say people warned you, okay?
Exactly. You're an idiot. You're an idiot if you voted for the current guy.
Basically. Okay.
Because the current guy wants to strip you of all your rights and pretty much make sure that you have you'll be issued a social credit card.
Yep, exactly.
And you'll be told you're a good Brazilian citizen. No, you're a bad one. You need to be spanked, taken out there. And you know what? Ted is also behind this. I bet he's getting kickbacks from Da Silva. I would not be surprised at all. A devious little, better be careful what I say. He may be listening.
He always is.
You're a lovely little bear. Don't put the second eye on, but whatever you do. Currently, you can basically trick him with one eye, 2 eyes. You'll be lost. You're done.
Ted can only use half his power because he's missing an eye. That's why we haven't all died yet.
Anyway, look, with carbon, it's a bit hard because you do have a certain level of decay when it comes to carbon. Carbon is very different, in the environment. Let's not forget that organic chemistry is basically carbon chemistry. That's really what it is. Anybody that doesn't understand that has got no idea about organic chemistry or basic science. And so when people demonize and say carbon is a pollutant, they're actually saying life is a pollutant. Complete and utter nonsense. So, I mean, you're a man of chemistry.
And I still have nightmares about the organic chem classes. So they're like, oh no, this reaction mechanism. Oh, how do you make this weird thing that you never see in your life? Oh no, you use this weird reagent that you are supposed to remember. There's no real rule. Oh, there are rules, but there's like a bunch of exceptions to all of them, and you must know the exceptions.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, fundamentally, carbon will bind to practically most things. Most of the things that it does bind to in organic chemistry is usually nitrogen and hydrogen, but beyond that, it can combine with a number of other things. And it's the reason why life exists, because most other matter, doesn't, has a very different chemistry.
Yep. And I think that as much as I say I have some leftover traumas from the classes, I think that taking organic chem, it gave me an extra appreciation for everything that happens in the body. Exactly. There are all those crazy reactions, like especially detox reactions. It's incredible, really. And to know that a bunch of enzymes have made specific catalytic sites possible. There are things that you can do industrially, but the body does all day, as if it were nothing.
Precisely. We're talking about billions of little machines, carbon-based machines that go around and interact with all sorts of tissues in so many different ways. And it's all these little, whether it's a hydroxyl group that's been removed or added or whatever, or any other molecule that's being taken off or added, or will change what we call even what we call a enzymatic complex. It's a number of steps where things are added or removed in these steps to basically get to something like pyruvate as an example, to go into the Krebs cycle or anything else. And so life without carbon would not be possible, pretty much. And that's why I say quite clearly that anybody that demonizes carbon is a misanthropist. Well, actually, not even a misanthropist. He's anti-life. You have to be opposed to all life, if you're against carbon. It's just madness where we've arrived to a time in civilization where up is down and down is up on every front: the gender front, the dietary front, the environmental front. We're talking about these people are supporting positions against life and supporting practices that actually cause more degradation to the environment. It's freaking crazy. And more loss of biodiversity and everything else. Can you imagine running around as an environmentalist and supporting grain agriculture that's actually decimating these environments? And you don't hear them talk a lot about diversity and all that, or whatever. The only areas that they talk about is, if you've noticed, they've shifted to these non-agricultural areas. So they'll talk about these wetlands or these areas wherever there's wildlife which has no value to the economy, they'll only talk about that. And they'll criticize certain players there, and they'll criticize the mining industry in particular. But then they want all these windmills and solar farms. Well, that requires a lot of mining. You can't have it both ways, So it's just absolutely madness. As I said, up is down and down is up. Makes no bloody sense. Do some people need to supplement when long fasting weeks? As it done, the fat old us provides everything we need except water. What do you think, Loki? So I can have some coffee, that is.
Well,
yes, you need some cofactors, as you know.
Exactly. We do need some cofactors, you can't, like, if you do weeks of fasting, you are going to run out of water soluble nutrition, so you can subsist only on that. And you do get some protein from breaking down fatty tissue, but it's not a lot. So over the long term, you will lose muscle. Yeah, that's basically basically comes down to the minerals, the water soluble vitamins. Can't fast for weeks without those.
Exactly, and that's very much true, because we do have stored fat soluble vitamins. Unless you're down to very little fat, body fat, then it can become an issue.
Yep.
But otherwise, even then, when you actually drop a lot of your, let's say, subcutaneous fat,
Yep.
the body still retains visceral fat, and retains visceral fat directly to provide energy for organs.
Interesting.
I mean, obviously, visceral fat can be a problem if it's like excessive around the organs. But if it's a certain level around the organs, not a problem. A certain level of visceral fat we need. It's the last fat to go is visceral fat.
Yep.
If you're starving, let's say, like was happening in the 80s in Africa, some parts where there was a mass starvation because of the food supply sort of collapse, or problems in certain regions. It's a bit more complicated than that. It actually was overproduction and lack of access to markets and pricing. And that's really what caused, and a lot of people actually lost their jobs in the agricultural sector in areas like Somalia and Ethiopia. And as a consequence, they starved because they didn't have work and there's no social welfare system there. That was the real reason, and exacerbated with food aid when they should have just given them money to buy from the domestic production, which were overproducing in those years. I actually looked at that and actually realized it's overproduction, nothing to do with underproduction of food, and most of it being exported because the locals couldn't afford it. Exactly. That's why they were starving. And by bringing in, it actually caused more problems for the economy. And I was in my 20s, and when I realized that, I dumped 2 organizations. There was some food famine organization. There was 2 groups that I was a member of. And once I realized what was really happening, and this is just, these virtual signaling people were exacerbating the problem by taking first world grain from America or Australia and importing it into those countries, which undermined their local economies, was actually making things worse and exacerbating and prolonging the famine. I realized that basically we're being lied on so many fronts. Even then, I realized it was bullshit, and I left a band of those. Aid famine or something like that. It was one group, and the other one it was something African aid or something that I was involved in. And then when I realized what the hell was going on, the economics, I go, oh, this is a con job, and I left them, and I criticized them in one of my final exiting meetings, and told them exactly what I thought about their organization and the reasons why it didn't go down well. But anyway, I like to upset people sometimes with the truths, even back then. It's probably one of my problems as a young person all the way through to adulthood. I haven't changed. Upsetting people.
For not making enemies, what are you doing after all?
Oh, well, it's an army, as I said, because some people go, I hate you, Harry. I said, get in line. There's a whole fucking line waiting to basically finish me off. Get in line. It's a long line. Just drive down a couple of kilometers down that way and to the end of the line. So, yeah. A lot of idiots out there, unfortunately, with a lot of nonsense. And I like to spank them because that's what they deserve for their nonsense. I've become probably maybe getting older, becoming grumpy old man. That's my excuse. But yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's a crazy world on those fronts. But that's what I realized very quickly. But with obviously, the body will lose subcutaneous fat, that is your stored energy for when you need it on a rainy day. Obviously, we create too much subcutaneous fat in the West because of engaging the lovely Randall cycle in that regard. But the fructose, on the other hand, does increase visceral fat. And that seasonally we consume that, and we produced more visceral fat. And that was a good thing because we could use it for our organs. Now, our body can take subcutaneous fat and still change some of it and put it into the viscera as well. So that's not an issue. And that's a good thing because you need a certain amount, especially around the heart. You need a certain amount of visceral fat that can immediately be pulled into the heart to provide that energy because it's an energy-intensive organ. So people shouldn't worry about visceral fat unless it's excessive. And they also should avoid doing tests which they do DEXA scans and they misinterpret the data. Like they do the percentages and I go, no, give me the amount, the volume. Percentages tell you nothing. Obviously if you've lost weight, visceral fat's going to look worse. But it's not really. It's percentages, I don't know why they do percentages. Don't ask me. I think it's stupid. They should only be doing volume.
Yeah, makes sense. There was a guy early on Bart's stream that he was asking, I've lost inches of my waist, but my visceral fat percentage has gone up, and I'm like, oh, this may be a proportion issue.
It's gone up by
Yeah.
amount or percentage? What did he say?
Percentage. Yeah, because he said he lost
Yeah.
lost
Yes, percentage. Yeah, it's
circumference.
always percentage.
And I'm like,
I friggin' hate them when they do that, because I had one other guy that actually asked me, and I said, what was it? Volume or percentage? Oh, it was
Yeah.
percentage. Well, if you've lost the other stuff, what do you think you're going to have of the other? The last thing your body, you can go down to nearly close. I'm not saying zero subcutaneous fat, but very close to very low levels, and you'll still have quite a bit of visceral fat around the organs. It's the last stuff to go. If it goes, you know what? Your organs get compromised. You get organ failure without enough visceral fat around to provide the energy for the organs. It's like, because many other parts, muscles use fat, energy, and all other parts of the body. So these are conserved. It's like in ketosis. You get some peripheral resistance or receptor site down regulation. So you can't use GLUT4 to take in, because you don't have enough insulin. You don't use it, and you take it in from GLUT1, any excess from exercise of glucose that actually increases, because that takes from basal level, doesn't require insulin from GLUT1, but GLUT4 does. And that's why you leave GLUT4 alone for vitamin C. And that's why vitamin C can be very low levels from a carnivore diet perspective, and not a problem, because you don't have any competition, because insulin's not around to be forcing glucose through that receptor site. That's only when you're eating more. So it's these misunderstandings that people have, the nuances, as I call them. It's all in the details, the madness, and the real information as well. And so, that's what a lot of people miss, unfortunately. But it's usually percentages that they calculate. I don't know why. I actually said to one guy that I was actually doing a scan for my heart a few years back, and I actually asked him why, and I said, "Oh, it's just industry standard." I said, "Well, that's illogical." So you're not comparing between an old scan and a new scan to see whether there's any change. No, we just give them percentages. And I go, well, how are you going to interpret that? Somebody can be skinny fat, can be because of the visceral, and can be considered unhealthy when they're not. And somebody else can be unhealthy because of a true TOFI. They're not. So you can have a true TOFI, somebody that can't produce a lot of subcutaneous fat, and somebody else who's just lost fat. And when you put them in a scanner, they look similar. But the reality is, you're actually you're misreading the two.
Yep.
One's on a low carb diet and has lost a lot of their subcutaneous fat. Yeah, it's crazy. So he just said it's an industry. So it's an industry practice. So just keep that in mind. Anybody that does something of a test of that sort, and that's when that sort of as people start losing the visceral fat, is the moment they go into this hyper, this strange sort of state of this rabbit starvation sort of. It's once you basically get to the very low levels of subcutaneous fat. This is what they call the rabbit starvation, when people become very, let's say, I'll eat anything, even my neighbor, anything. They have this really mental change in their mind where they're looking for food like mad at that point. And it's at the point that they are tapping into the visceral fat, that transition where they're starting to eat away the transitional fat, the visceral fat. Because if they consume too much of that, the organs will be compromised and you'll have organ failure because not enough guaranteed energy for the organs. That's the point where that transition happens, that mental transition. So there you go, boys and girls. You just learned something new about physiology and mental states. Okay, when it comes to coenzyme Q10, any form better. Well, you can take, if you're young, just take the standard CoQ10. Your body can convert it. But do you really need it? If you're eating enough animal foods, you probably don't need it. People that are only on a statin really need it. Oh, okay. Hold on. He's saying a few other things. Dysbiosis. Okay. Any other form better than that? You can actually get a liposomal form, which is much easier, much better bioabsorbed. Any ballpark figure of the therapeutic upper limit? Think of throwing some at my dysbiosis. Okay. So if you've got malabsorption issues, I usually say to people, consider a liposomal. So on iHerb, they do have a liposomal form of CoQ10. That means it's in a liposomal lipid nanoparticle, and it will actually be taken in much easier without requiring a lot of bile and stuff like that. So that's what people that have got malabsorption issues, they use the liposomal vitamin D, the liposomal B12, all these things. They use the liposomals for a lot of their. They are a bit more expensive. They tend to be about anywhere between 15 to 25% more. Nowadays, they are much cheaper than they used to be. In the past, they used to be like double the price or more. They have come down because there's a lot of competition in the liposomal field. And for people that have got dysbiosis issues, they are a better option as they're trying to resolve those issues. So I know there's a number of liposomal forms. Now, if you're older, you need to look at ubiquinol, which is the reduced form of CoQ10, because you can't do the conversion as well as you get older. So just keep that in mind. Anyway, Nathan, don't tell us fasting is bad, please, Uncle. No, I'm not going to tell you that. Completely something different. But it will still rattle your cage. Anyway. Yes. Something to do with the hormones. That's all you get, you buggers. Nothing more than that. That's enough. Otherwise, I'll have to send Ted around and spank you, Nathan, for trying to extract information from me, you bad boy. Hi, Harry. Why do some people eating carnivore get tartar build up on their teeth, oxalate dumping? We don't really know. It's possibly most people that usually resolves, they take, it could be a fat soluble malabsorption issue that causes it. And so, because usually if you're getting enough vitamin K2 in the diet, and that means you're absorbing K2 as a fat soluble vitamin, then you should not have this problem. If you're not, then you may have this problem. Then there's also another thing, a derangements in the microbiome of the mouth.
Exactly.
That also can cause it. And so even though you're on a carnivore diet, you still got derangements or you're missing certain species. What you can do is you can actually get now supplements, which are like, what do they call them? The not lickable ones. Oh, God. That you put them in your mouth and you sort of...
Sublingual ones?
No.
Not that.
The type that you just put in your mouth and they slowly dissolve in your mouth.
Yes.
They've got a name from... It must be brain fogged. Must have been... I must have had a plant. There must have... Somebody... My coffee was probably spiked with some sort of plant compound by Ted while I wasn't watching. That's what I put it down to.
I don't think I've ever heard that word, actually. I know what you're talking about, but
yeah. So basically, there are supplements that can actually fix your the microbiome in your mouth. There's a couple of bacteria. that we're missing sometimes. There's also a situation, this is, let's say people have been on a plant-based diet for a very long time, for many years. What can happen is certain strains of bacteria will translocate from the mouth to the colon. And so that's for a future video. I'll cover it properly. And this can be an issue as well that actually affects the microbiome of the mouth and actually causes derangements both in the mouth, in the oral cavity, plus in the colon. So yeah, where only a very small amount of this bacteria should be there, and it should be more in the mouth. And it's believed the reason for the translocation is due to low stomach acidity, because it can actually get through. Otherwise, if you had good stomach acidity, it wouldn't get through.
So once again, our friend the stomach.
Yes. So plant-based diets reduce stomach affect stomach acidity. So does H. pylori infections.
I've actually been hearing a lot about a certain protozoa called Blastocystis hominis. It's implicated in like Crohn's disease and Hashimoto's as well.
Yep.
It seems to be associated with low stomach acidity as well. Very interesting.
It is. There's a number of, even candida itself, when it gets into overgrowth sort of situation, can also suppress stomach acidity, can affect as well, because it prefers an alkaline environment. Which is what you get in the small intestine once the bile comes in, and some of the bicarbonates from the pancreas and lower and increase the pH and lower the acidity. So you've got that, but once it actually gets into the stomach, can actually affect negatively stomach acidity. And a lot of people that have been plant-based diets for years have got a lot of fungal growth around their body. It's a headache to get rid of. So yeah, you're going to have to do the antifungal. There's a lot of the natural ones that I prefer, and trying to get the acidity levels happening in your stomach and all that to try and suppress a lot of this sort of stuff and reverse it over time. But it's drawn out. It can take sometimes months for people. It's a bugger for a lot of people. So yeah, not an easy thing. But it's really, when you're eating inappropriate foods to your speciation, you'll get these derangements. It's like the cows. They have to pump them through all the antibiotics and all sorts of things because, again, they give them a whole lot of grains as they finish them off in the last month or two once they come off pasture. And what happens is they get this massive amount of overgrowth of all sorts of pathogenic bacteria and all sorts of other things. And they have to suppress that. You would think that cows, shitloads of bacteria to break down and organisms and all that. Yeah, but when you derange that, you get a lot of health problems in the cow. And so they have to suppress that. It's just crazy stuff that we're doing. But again, it's the motivation for money, not the health of the animal or the health of humans. Unfortunately, I can't seem to get it here in Japan. Yeah, look, maybe Dean, you've got relatives in North America, in the US. You can always get them to purchase it off Amazon and then send it to you. That's the other way of getting it. As I said, look, I'm going to try it for Dad to see how it goes. It seems to have some efficacious. If you're healthy, I suspect if you take it, you're not really going to see much effect at all if you're healthy. Because, if somebody's healthy, why would you see a massive effect? Somebody who's got health issues are probably going to see more of an effect than somebody who doesn't have health issues. And that's why I say to people, like I said earlier, the other person obviously needed probably has got dysbiosis, maybe not having brain fog and energy issues, can't absorb, fat soluble nutrition, other things like that. Fine, you may need to do that. But for a lot of other people, it makes no logical sense. Zero. If you're healthy, why are you taking all these things? There's a few things for biohacking purposes, like, a few grams in the evening of taurine to lower the cortisol, to improve the sleep, and to also improve the production of new stem cells in the brain. That's fine, as a biohack. But if, you're young and you're not athletic and stuff like that, where you need it to reduce lactate levels and to be able to train for longer, why the hell do you need taurine then? If you're basically sedentary, relatively sedentary, you're not exercising, you don't have any health problems, you're very young, and all that. So, I mean, a lot of people are supplementing too many things, which they probably don't need, just eat regular food. But if you've got underlying issues, then you probably need some of these things to fix the problems. So I'm not against supplements. I'm against misuse of supplements for people that don't really need them, just because, I'm missing out, I must have my, you're missing out on tobacco. Should you have tobacco? You're missing out on many other things. We need to be serious about these things. Do we need them before we start just putting everything down our throats? And some things that are contraindicated, which is they're invisible, apparently. It's what's been happening to Ted. Oggy, hello to you. I remember his previous video that he had with Ted. I haven't seen today's. Haven't had a chance yet. But
yeah, I showed up.
Oh, did you?
On the live stream.
So, but his last one were, God, the abuse that Ted got. Couldn't believe it. I actually I think I left a comment about that abuse. Was it the last one or the previous one? I took Ted's side, hopefully to win some brownie points. Thoughts on Cerule Stem Enhance for over 80s? Yeah, I'd say a good thing. If you're old, you've had some level of damage and stuff like that, yeah, that can be useful. So, because it does, as you get older, you release less stem cells, pretty much. And you could have fibrosis around, different tissue types and stuff like that. So even taurine can help enhance Cerule products as well under those sort of circumstances, by allowing to clean up some of the tissue, which then allows these sort of products to get around, circulation things. I know he's got some sort of flow thing, but you can actually also use citrulline for vasodilation to achieve something similar, and that's more cost effective. And then combine that with Cerule. So there are other options people can use. It's sort of, yeah, but if you're in that age bracket, yeah, you probably need those sort of things. He's got a collagen one, which has got an active peptide that could be useful for some people. But, if somebody doesn't have any knee problems, doesn't have any, real reasons for it, well, why you're buying it, you probably get it more than enough from the meat of the proteins you need to just keep the regular turnover of cells. But if you've got something which is damaged from previous life and is taking longer to resolve, yeah, using some of this sort of stuff can help, even if it's just for 6 months or a year or two, as to heal that a bit faster, the tissue. And that's where also that BPC 157 seems to have some improvements in healing as well, for people that have got existing problems. People that don't have problems, it probably won't do much for them at all. But people that do have problems, they will see some benefit. It's actually been banned by the International Olympic Association. So it must be doing something if it's being banned. Let's put it that way.
Well, just like colostrum was banned from sports competitions.
Yeah, and that's health, and that's very healthy as well, and for the immune system in particular. So I've never been able to understand how enhancing your immune system is a sports advantage. I mean, really? I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
so people can enhance their stuff with other things by just increasing their vitamin D. We're going to ban that as well. It's becoming ridiculous.
No.
An advantage should be that you getting an anabolic advantage, not just because somebody feels healthier and is more functional. I mean, it's becoming a bit ridiculous, I think.
Yeah, I thought the claim was related to anabolism, but I don't think you can get a lot of it by consuming a small amount of cholesterol. So
No, God. I mean, what next? Let's say even taurine was banned because it can actually has a myostatin inhibition. I mean, that enhances muscle protein synthesis in a sense. Taking extra leucine will do that as well. So where does it end? It becomes a bit ridiculous at some level. So yes, things like anabolic steroids, they quite rapidly induce that. These sort of minor things should not be banned. Things that actually cause rapid difference and change in magnitude, they're like many orders of magnitude higher. Yes, but it's another bureaucracy gone mad. You got a bureaucracy and they have to justify their existence. So we need to ban more things. It's not enough, ban the thing. It's like politicians. We need to write more political, laws. Like in America, for instance, I'll give you an example. For their Social Security Act, there's about 23,000 pieces of legislation. Crazy, as if you need that amount. And on top of that, there's well over 100,000 for amendments. You'd have to study nearly half your life to learn all the nuances of the actual code in order to basically make sure that your clients are well catered for. If you're new to the whole thing, you're useless. You'd have to find some old geezer that's actually studied the code for many decades that knows what they're talking about to be able to properly assess you and all that. But why do you need so much legislation? Because it's just they need a reason to exist. As I said, professional politicians, career politicians, that's what they do. That's their job. So they have to generate shit to basically and annoy everybody else's life in order for justify their existence. But the reality is you don't need that. If you go back to the 50s and 60s when things were a bit more stable and a bit more, and you didn't have these career politicians, we had a bit of extra turnover of the political establishment more, they'd be there for a decade or less and go. Other people would replace them. And they came from the real world. They came from real jobs. People were electricians, people were lawyers, people were accountants, people were, ex-soldiers, or they were basically, brickies or drivers or farmers or whatever. And they came into politics for a small amount of period of time and then they left. They weren't career politicians out of university, So, and these people hardly wrote any much legislation whatsoever. Very little. They were practical. What works? What do we need? Oh, this. And back then, in the 50s and 60s, things worked quite well with a more practical approach. And even both sides of politics in many cases agreed with similar policies. And the reason for that is because they were taking a practical approach, not an ideological approach. Now it's all ideology and all basically no practicality whatsoever. Friggin' madness. Anyway, sorry for going from stem cell all the way to that's how the Harry Serpanos show. You should need to know that by now. That's how we operate here.
Yep.
Yeah, more for your bang for your bucks. Not that I've seen many bucks, that is. I'm taking. So Deborah is. I can't say I have noticed much except for improved sleep. Okay, there you go. So you may have had an underlying sleep issue, and it helped improve that. I haven't actually investigated the sleep stuff, so that's an interesting thing. I have investigated the clotting stuff and a few other things, and the musculoskeletal stuff when it comes to BPC, and some other areas in the brain seems to have some benefits, but I haven't actually looked at the sleep cycle. Interesting. That's something that I didn't consider.
Yeah, wasn't expecting that as well.
No. I've sort of more focused on taurine and sleep and stuff like that. But even taurine can sometimes, in a small amount, there are a couple of bacteria that can actually, people that have got sulfur issues, they can, let's say you lose a lot of your, pretty much most of your bifidobacteria and most of your lactobacillus out of your gut, that is. Then there are a number of strains, pathogenic strains, that can actually increase quite a bit. And some of these can actually use sulfur. That means taurine, methionine from animal foods, all sulfurs, garlic, onions, whatever sulfur-rich foods exist. So whether it's plant or an animal, doesn't make any difference. Eggs and all that. And some of these people can get a lot of pain in their gut because these little bugs are now out of control. There's nobody controlling them, and they really get bad, and they cause a lot of derangements for some people, and they also cause disturbances, sleep disturbances, and insomnia, and all sorts of things. And people go, I'm taking sulfur, I'm taking taurine, I'm getting this effect. Well, it's because of that. So I've had one person in close, not on YouTube's, not a YouTuber, but a family member that's actually had this. But I know the person's history, and she's got a lot of health issues, and she also has, she'll pass out due to epilepsy. So she's got a lot of health issues to be there.
Wow.
She's just recently, we're using keto esters and stuff like that, so other things. But yeah, she's definitely, and she also did the jab a couple of times, and we know that knocks out bifidobacteria for good. And yeah, so I'm going to have to chat with her son and probably get her on a Kefir and a few other things to sort out the gut microbiome issue. But this is probably going to become a bigger problem as we move forward because of a lot of people that have used the jab, and a lot of people that are still they've still got a weak immune system because they've got a poor vitamin D status and all that. And so through the respiratory system, you're not blocking and stopping there with the T lymphocytes and other parts of the immune system, the white blood cells and stuff like that. You're not stopping the initial stage in these mucosal layers that are in your respiratory tract. And because you're not stopping it there, it's getting into your body and then causing other derangements, these spikes and all that. So this is a problem as we're moving forward that I've identified now with 2 people, and now with this new evidence coming from this Dr. Sabrina Hassan, it seems it will become a bigger problem, and people will become even more sensitive to things like eggs, sulfur-rich foods. They'll have difficulty eating them in that regard. So that's going to require a new protocol to deal with these people in terms of the bifidobacteria and stuff like that. I'm actually investigating now a couple of good supplements to help in that regard. That's in enteric systems, so they can go all the way through to the colon. So that's really important, because there's a number of strains that have got a different pH, and there's a problem with the stomach. So a friend of mine said, couldn't you stick it up their bum? Oh, you probably could. I'll let you. Yeah, you could do that.
We've actually got someone asking questions about that. I was like, well, why don't you try it?
Well, there's another way of actually putting it into a fluid, letting it and all that.
Yes.
And then basically with a syringe putting it up your rear end. So,
Okay.
well, that's one way of
there's
bypass.
actually a
There,
legitimate use for
yes, there
enemas.
is. There is. For yes, for using the needle. Oh, well, the syringe without the needle.
Oh
Yes,
my god.
yes. So that is an option for people to get certain bacteria back into your colon that may be missing. Yeah, the modern world and people's ailments. Yes, very messy stuff.
Oh god.
I had very low vitamin D despite being in the sun a lot. Why could this be? Because you may have problems with cholesterol, because the cholesterol that is used to produce vitamin D in the skin is not the same as the stuff that's in the lipids moving around your body. It is a modified version called cholesterol sulfate. It is a water soluble, not a fat soluble cholesterol form. And if you have, for whatever reason, some inability to convert cholesterol to this cholesterol sulfate, or you're depleted in sulfur, so that's another possibility, and then you can't combine the sulfur to the cholesterol to modify it through certain enzymatic steps, then you can't basically produce sufficient water soluble vitamin D, which is called vitamin D sulfate, which is what is the vitamin D that you produce. It's not a fat soluble, it's a water soluble form. And that's why you can actually produce 10,000 or 20,000 IUs in the skin if you're out long enough or more, and any excess gets peed out. So that's why you can megadose from the sun, but you can't megadose with fat soluble forms of vitamin D. That's the difference, boys and girls. So yeah, it could be a sulfur issue. Oxalate could be exacerbating that. There's a whole lot of raft of reasons why this could be affecting. You can also take the option of a 5,000 IU liposomal form of vitamin D. You will find one on iHerb, a liposomal form. You can take that, which means that you can get it into your system much easier. Are we adding a bit to the styling, to the proposed haircut? Dom. Had to be Dom. He's probably not in Europe. He's probably in the Middle East. That's why he's able to, being an engineer, he's doing some work in the Middle East. Thank you, Dom. Yeah, well, yeah, it'll be with your contribution and with I could basically go for a full stylish probably head. We won't go radical. Probably upset Mira. She'll go, "What the hell have you done?" I'll be told off, and rightfully so. And Sammy's here as well. G'day, Sammy. I've popped a few times in the Zoom, but I haven't seen you there. I've only seen Paul and Richard, and we've had a few chats, the two of us. So it's been most of it. I usually do this. Just pee out excess. I think we've covered that. We have covered that. For anyone having problems with nocturnal leg cramps, I started taking 4 milligrams of boron supplement daily, and the cramps stopped completely. Yes, good stuff. Can normalize a lot of things. Yeah, boron does. Yeah, but don't take higher than that. That's the sort of, because it can create an underlying magnesium and potassium deficiency if in higher amounts. Just keep that in mind. boys and girls. I do have a video covering. I do cover boron. It's probably on the Clips. That's right. It's on the Clips channel. If you haven't subscribed to the Clips channel, why not? Go over there and subscribe. Oh, he was here earlier. You were. Hello as well. I went to a movie last night, stupid. Ate popcorns and some donuts. You bad boy. First thing is in the morning, farting and a few joint aches. Teaches me a lesson I know better.
Yep.
Exactly. Just, yeah. So once you go really, I've sort of done the bad thing as well, and then the next day I felt like absolute crap. So I know exactly what you. But going back and thinking about it, I always felt a bit like crap. You know, we just because it was continuous, you'd never thought about. You know, you only notice now when between the differences. You know, that's the thing. We're always being toxically assaulted. Yes, I have put on the community post a few links for a number of other companies that provide taurine in the free form. And I'm waiting to get some replies back, and hopefully they will. Some of them may be interested in doing a discount thing with me. So we'll see. So,
Truly joining Big Taurine.
That's it. But I'm not going to benefit from it. It'll only be you guys. so yeah. But look, actually, I will be getting a benefit because I'll be buying from them as well. So I'll be getting a discount as well. So yeah.
Oh,
so
thanks for that, by the way, because I keep getting a bunch of people on Discord. They're like, "No, it's been discontinued." I'm like, "Oh my god!"
That's just that brand. There are other ones as well that are good quality ones as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the Carlson one as well. I haven't actually I need to contact them this week. It's just I'll be trying to prepare a couple of notes for other things, and plus with Dad's tomorrow appointment, the things that I need to ask the doctor, a whole lot of things. So it's going to be, let's say, a long, relatively, to cover a whole lot of points for him. Anyway, we'll move on. Oh, it did nothing. Well, you're probably super healthy, Jenny, and probably didn't need it at all. It depends. Look, it doesn't. It affects certain areas of the body, from what I understand. I didn't realize that it improved sleep in some people. Then there are going to be genetic differences and how well, because remember, this is a natural compound that it's in your gut and has, circulates in the body and actually does healing in the body. And as you get older, it declines. So if you're relatively young, well, it won't do much for you because you probably get more than enough. You produce more than enough to cover all that. But if you're much older, like middle age, 50s plus or older, and have an underlying health issues or whatever, probably is going to make a bigger difference to you than somebody that's younger with less issues. So there's a lot of differences in that regard. I'm joining the gym. God, really? Slowly build up my way back to play squash from the next month. I just need to remember not to push too hard.
Okay, sounds fun.
Dean. I hope you're not doing all that cardio, mate.
Yep.
We'll have the ball band will get upset with you.
Absolutely.
You need the numbers. Look, I'll actually have to I'll have to post a new. I always upset Paul, and I always upset everyone when I actually put the new Zoom thing because everybody has to memorize a new password. I say just use the link. If you use the full link, it actually has the password right at the end.
Okay. Oh. Oh my.
Maybe their browser truncates it. I don't know.
Probably. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. Unless you get the specific link that is the complete one.
Yeah. Because sometimes I've actually put in, and people are saying, "Oh, hit it," and I hit it, and actually will immediately. But obviously, I'm the end user. But I did try it from another account as well. One of my older accounts, which I won't give away because that was used for other things, which we won't go into. It's my IT life, my prior one, so I won't go into that. Yes. Anyway, taking drawing didn't help. Yep, we covered that. We covered that. And we'll move on. Molybdenum helps process sulfur out of the body. Yes, and so does choline. They both do. They choline by methylating primarily, reducing it out. But yes, does. But I do have a problem with people megadosing molybdenum. It does actually lower slightly blood sugar as well, so it has a bit of an effect there. Did I do actually a video on that? I think I did. I may. An old one.
Yep.
I think. Yeah, I did. Anyway, thanks, H. Not a problem. I'm Googling iodine levels in my area now. Not a problem. Yep. I'll leave it at that as a comment. And we'll move on because we're we're too far behind as normal, but that's the Serpanos. Be late and be annoying show for those who are new to the channel. And if you disagree, that's hate speech, and I will have to call the bald man and requisition his assassin, Lord Edward Yellow, to come around and sort you out.
That's very dangerous. Very dangerous indeed.
Hey, Harry, any thoughts on protocols on recovering after antibiotics? I've talked about this many times. My wife and son were both given 48 hours on the drip after he was born due to infection of the placenta. She's breastfeeding. Fair enough. Well, it's the B vitamins. So B vitamins for 3 months together with vitamin D, 5,000 IUs. Now for your son, it has to be much lower. I'm trying to remember the actual levels. These things. Let me just look it up. Give me a sec. Typing away like mad. Go away. Okay, so in your, oops, bring that down. So for the child, you're looking at probably about 1,000 IUs to about 2,000 IUs. Now that it's just been born, I would actually put it on 2,000 for at least a week, and then drop it down to 1,000 with the B vitamins. And the reason for that is because these beneficial bacteria need both B vitamins and vitamin D. Now, you can't use the same ones. There are some for children, vitamin D, B vitamins, because the pantothenic acid thing, you don't want too much. You'll have to Google and actually try and find very low dose B vitamins for children. they do exist. I think they have ones which are like chewable, stuff like that for kids, or what do they call them? The other ones, they call them gummies or like that. So you'll have to look for that. Look, different places, different products. So you'll have to do a bit of a search for that. And that's sort of important. For your wife, kefir is not a problem. She can do a kefir, stuff like that. And even the child can be useful to basically do a kefir with the breast milk and sort of combine it in that regard. So if you actually use a pump, get the breast milk, do some put some kefir grains, that will help. So you'll have to look up for some kefir grains that have got certain types of lactobacillus strains and bifidobacteria strains. So they do exist, and you get the grains, and you actually produce. Don't give them regular milk; give them the mother's milk. In that regard, because of the gut permeability with children, and mother's milk not a problem with gut permeability. It takes a while until the gut seals properly. So in that regard, yes, you can use some of the kefir grains to restore some of those beneficial bacteria and stuff like that. The child should have on its skin surface, as it's coming out of the birth canal, will have some lactobacillus in that regard, and strains of that sort. And so the child over time, because it licks itself and all that, it will over time eventually absorb some of that stuff and will come into the body. We're just trying to help it along in those early stages by doing a bit of kefir. So yeah, so that would be my approach to the whole issue. But remember, the B vitamins, make sure they are child-friendly ones in very low doses, and make sure that they've got the proper stuff, like they've got, not cobalamin, it's methylcobalamin and methylfolate and all that. So make sure that they've got the proper sort of types, that the B6 is the P5P variety. So you need to have the proper types of water-soluble vitamins that are appropriate, not all this sort of other shit that exists. Now, there is that other one that, the one that I recommend on iHerb, that has got a whole lot of other nootropics and all that. It's probably fine for your wife. For your kid, definitely not. We don't want to get a whole lot of nootropics. They're still in that growth phase. There's a lot of hormonal things. We don't want to disturb any of that in the child. So you got to be very careful as they're growing, and not allow the genes to do their job in that regard, because that's what they're designed to. They've been doing it for a very long time. We don't want to interfere with any plant compounds in any way. So just keep that in mind. And probably even for your wife, she probably needs to go for something without those compounds, because that could get through the breast milk potentially. So yeah, drop me a line, Justin. Just drop me an email and just remind me. And even though I'm right behind, I haven't actually sort of dropped off the email at the moment a bit, and that's just because I've just been too busy with other things. So comments will solicit a quicker response than emails. Let's put it that way. So if you put a comment in after this video, then that'll probably elicit a quicker response. I will put in some links and some information for you, and other people may find use to that for that now or in the future as well. So I'll get ones that are friendly for breastfeeding mothers and friendly for children and stuff like that. It won't happen until tomorrow, because I won't have the time to do it earlier. Does taurine interact with? Yes, it does. Some of the brain chemistry is affected by nicotine, and taurine does have an effect on that brain chemistry. So even though there's no research, I suspect, I'm hypothesizing at the moment, speculating, that there should be some sort of interaction. Exactly how that interaction manifests itself, I don't know. But I've never seen a person have any problems, Gabrielle, who's a smoker and taking taurine. So it's possibly a very insignificant interaction. But since they do affect similar pathways, there's got to be some level of interaction. How much? Don't know. So yep, that's fine if you're getting good, if it's improving your sleep. Some people, I only take, like in the evening, much less. I usually take 2 and then 4 later on. Sometimes I did drop back down to 2 and 2, and then I sort of in recent times, because I've been a bit stressed, there's been a few things that have been happening in my life and stuff like that, I upped the dose to 4 in the evening. And that was for the simple reason of to bring down the cortisol, because it does. That's why I upped it, to improve. We're modern people, if you're a tribal person, you're out there, it's kumbaya, you're out on the campfire talking about the actual hunt, you're not that stressed. We, on the other hand, modern people are quite stressed, and that we're also exposed to higher amounts of blue light in the evening. So that's another problem that raises cortisol, and disturbs our sleep cycle and our melatonin production. So very important that we get enough melatonin to heal our mitochondria, because we need energy. Not enough energy, we cannot heal. That's why as we get older, when we have mitochondrial deficiencies of any sort or derangements, we have less capacity to heal. Fundamentally, mitochondria are the real game, and diet is the real key thing to making sure your mitochondria function well. Low deuterium foods, which is animal foods. So that's fundamental. Light and all the other stuff do play an important role, but if you don't get the deuterium food side correct, light's not going to really help you as much. Will help you some. It's an added bonus. Important. Some people are more sensitive to light issues than others. Depends. And a question, QQQ, Harry, what do you think of Dr. Malcolm Kendrick idea about atherosclerosis in the book? The clot thickens. I haven't read the book. That's simple as that. Now, clotting factors do vary due to genetics between people. And so to say that it is only the clotting would be sort of very narrow, or you could say very reductionist to say it's only clotting. But for me, I think it's a factor. David Diamond, he's a big proponent of the clotting theory as well. So he's an American physician, and he talks a lot about the clotting factors. And yeah, it does. Look, people that have got high clotting factors, genetics, I do, my father has, and probably the reason why he was more susceptible to the jab than other people, getting more clotting, in his body. And so, I've had issues, health issues, but at the same time, even people that don't have these genetics get atherosclerosis because of high levels of inflammation caused by excessive amounts of seed oils, and damage to the mitochondria and all these sort of things. It's a myriad of things that assault our endothelium that actually bring this about. So high blood pressure isn't the issue if that's all you've got. If everything else is healthy, high blood pressure is not going to cause. But if you've got, let's say, some derangement and you've actually compromised your endothelium, your vascular tree as it's called, all your arteries and stuff like that. If you've actually compromised your vascular tree, then high blood pressure can be a problem, because it can actually cause more lesions to emerge, because you get this the pressure affecting those surfaces of the endothelium. But if you've got, glycocalyx, sort of high up like that, and with a negative charge repelling everything, you're not going to have a problem. And that's why you can exercise high intensity, which raises blood pressure, and not have any consequences negative. So we have to be very clear that it's within the framework of a lot of factors that come together to basically create this. It's not one factor, but the only one factor that I can think of is the diet. A diet high in seed oils and refined sugars that increase glycation and oxidation, and as a consequence, inflammation in the actual arteries, is going to basically, and if you're doing this assaulting the endothelium, the vascular tree, over decades and decades, you're going to cause a lot of health problems. That's really what it is. And clotting factors are just a downstream effect of all that, but not the only thing. But no, I haven't read his book, but I've looked at research on clotting factors and all sorts of other things to understand my own health issues, which I had to. Yes.
Oh the sleep is getting the better of me.
Fair enough. If you need to go, go.
Just before I go, I don't know if you saw this, but I think I saw there was a bit of drama on Twitter. I think it was Carnivore Aurelius that started a post about this, but
not him again.
Yeah, him again. But apparently, I actually hadn't heard about this. I'm not even sure what happened, but apparently one of the founders of the Weston A. Price Foundation has died of heart disease. And as you'd expect, that sparked a lot of conversation when people are like, oh, they're crackpots. See, the guy has died of heart disease. But, with the Weston A. Price folk, they love mixing carbs and fats.
Exactly.
That's one thing. But who knows? Yeah. Also, who knows? Yeah. Because, we don't know
and
his
a lot
early
of
life or
exactly.
any of this.
We don't even know whether he has certain genetics which predisposes him to worse outcomes from the Randall cycle activation.
Exactly.
And a lot of the Weston A. Price people nowadays, they'd, back in the 50s and back then, people ate seasonally. That means they ate 2/3 of their diet came from animal foods and 1/3 from plants, and that was seasonal. And if that, sometimes even less than that. I mean, vegetarians, remember the 7-Day Adventist type studies back then, it was like 50% dairy. Even Grundy stated that. Remember the video that I made? Let alone if you add the other animal foods, what sort of vegetarian diet? One that's 50% dairy, which is animal-based, then add eggs to that, add fish to that, we're nearly 70% or more. So what's left of the vegetables? Some vegetables. You know what I mean? So obviously those, and physically active to basically reduce glycogen levels. You're not, these people weren't sedentary back then. They were, working, more physical related jobs. So when you put all that together, lifestyle and diet of that period, you don't have the glyphosate to cause derangements in the gut microbiome. You don't have all these other things. Obviously, the outcomes are going to look very different. Precisely. We live in a very different world now, where these people are basically consuming foods that are spiked with a lot of other chemistry that didn't exist back then. And on top, like glyphosate and stuff like that, low-grade antibiotic, which is what it is. I'm not saying it. Monsanto themselves got a patent on that glyphosate is an antibiotic. It's registered down. So you're taking, when you're eating plants that have got glyphosate or Roundup on them, which is the majority of plants nowadays, you're eating any plants, you're getting glyphosate. You're getting a low-dose antibiotic every single friggin' day. So if you're doing that and you're actually deranging your gut microbiome, causing other levels of inflammation throughout the body as a consequence, then, what are you going to say? Just because that person then eats some meat, some fat-soluble vitamins, that's the problem? I mean, that's just illogical. That's not research. That's an N of one of a person who's doing a whole lot of things, and who knows what elements are causing the problem. What are the drivers? So, people could argue all sorts of things. It's not an experiment, so you cannot extrapolate just because of somebody. And most of these people now in the Western A price community have become more plant-based anyway. They've moved away from their roots of the original Western A price, and they're eating more plants than what they used to in the past. So that's another factor. So I say to people, well, you got to look at the details.
As usual.
Yeah. Unfortunately, propaganda gets in the way.
Yeah, but thought it was an interesting thing to go over.
But a crackpot like him would jump on that. He's the sort of person. It's the vegans are exactly the same. They will jump on anything. Why? Because they love to basically attack people.
Yeah, no, but he wasn't even attacking them because, he was just since he's basically on the same page as them when it comes to like fruit and other things.
Yeah,
things
exactly.
of the sort. He felt like he needed to defend them.
Okay, so he's in the defense mode.
Yep. But he has no idea what he's saying. It was actually kind of poor on his part.
Yeah, look, it's bizarre, yeah. At the end of the day, they're doing a mixed diet. They're engaging the Randle cycle, a number of these people. So that causes some level of inflammation as well. If you're doing it over decades, there's going to be some poor outcomes.
Look, like Aurelius himself now, he said recently that his macros are now looking like breast milk. That's what he's doing.
What?
So it's like oh god, I don't understand.
Okay.
He probably started all this mess because he overdosed on liver. He's probably had this issue similar to Paul.
Yeah,
and then he's like,
possibly.
no, but we need carbs. Come on. It's like the people with carnivore in their names, the most famous accounts, none of them are carnivores. I'm like, what? At least Paul has had the decency of dropping the carnivore MD label. He's just calling himself Paul Saladino now.
Is he? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. But I haven't really, I haven't really sort of followed. Who cares? He's
at least from what I saw last time.
Just another crackpot.
Vitamin Cluck.
All animals require vitamins. Cluck, cluck, cluck. Even urine has some of it in it.
Oh god!
You're full of it.
Don't
mate.
need to go recycling it though.
Exactly. Recycle your own and drink it.
Bear Grylls mode.
Some people think it's beneficial, mate. You probably already know.
Yeah, and then next thing they'll be doing enemas with it.
You probably will be. I use a straw to suck it all up.
Yes. Yeah, I bet it's like a stainless steel straw,
Oh, obviously, goes without saying.
They're all those nature-loving people.
Precisely.
Oh god. Late night humor, I guess.
Yes. Somebody talk about the great barbecue meats. Picanha.
Yep.
Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah.
Picanha?
Yeah.
Picanha.
Yeah, this NH is a bit of a pain in Portuguese.
Okay, so it becomes like a double N nearly.
Yep.
Picanha. Okay.
That's big. Yeah, but apparently he had some when he went to Lisboa and didn't realize the Portuguese were so into Brazilian barbecue. I need to go visit Portugal at some point.
Well, that's where most of the Brazilians originate from anyway.
Yep.
Oh, what's Johnny saying? Full lactobacillus aeroteric yogurt. People use inulin fiber powder to increase the bacterial count. Is the inulin powder problem for the gut? Could be. There's mixed research on whether it is or whether it isn't.
Yep.
In that regard, I prefer doing like a kefir yogurt, which is much better in terms of and that's one way of actually increasing the. I know Necro Kitty did quite a lot of kefir yogurt herself, and that's a better approach in that regard. The Randall cycle.
Tried
Ever heard of the Randall?
cream?
Ever, exactly. Try eating. Just go on an ice cream diet. Nothing else. Just go on an ice cream
Go to
diet.
Naples, just go to the pasta and ice
That's
cream.
And just sprinkle a bit of extra sugar on it and a bit of extra cream. Amplify the Randall cycle, and you'll get fat. Believe me.
Jesus.
And if that doesn't work,
Yep.
You can't be full of shit because you're basically urine. So you're an alien. You're an alien piss pot. God, nearly confirmed. Nearly confirmed.
Excellent.
Up syndrome. Oh, here's another colourful character. Morning to you as well, mate. Yes, we've had urine here for a while, just pissing all over us. As usual, nothing's changed. He likes the basically the wet stuff. Golden showers are his favorite.
That's it.
G'day, Gary. Yeah, I know it's descended to.
It's always like this towards the end.
It could be anything. Could be. Yeah, the whole place is the channel's descended to.
Yep.
Have you tried bread? Nice one, Nathan. He's an alien, Nathan.
Yes, aliens don't get fat as easily.
Yes, and noodles.
What the hell?
Okay,
oh my God.
It's confirmed.
Yeah,
he's an alien. But you know what he probably is? He's one of those little skunks called a tofi. He's a tofi, urine tofi. Change the name to urine tofi.
It's like a Simpsons character that is a tofi. Oh my God, because he's all yellow. Oh my.
So we've reclassified him. Can you also, before you go, drop in the Discord link?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Let's get that in there.
It might not look like it. My hands are getting heavy.
Okay. If you need to go.
Yeah, I'll actually drop the link and I'll be going here. Oh,
yep. Yeah.
Gonna do some deadlifting tomorrow. There you go.
How will New Zealand? Oh well, with a ball ban over there, and Ted gosh, you guys are going to hell in a handbasket. You know, the best thing that could happen to the place is you could slide into the Southern Ocean.
Yes, you will become the kingdom of Bartia soon enough.
Yes, you'll be repurposed upstream growing.
That's it. Harry, guess I'll be going. It's
Not a
nice to
problem.
be here once again.
Yeah, thanks for turning up.
No problem. Always good to be here. And yeah, stay well, everyone. Stay well, Harry. And
Appreciate it.
yeah, God bless you.
We'll try and get in earlier so we can talk a bit politics before all the questions turn up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good one. Anyhow.
Excite them. Anyway, take care. See you, mate.
See you, Harry. See you, everyone.
And we'll move on. I need to move. Get a fat transplant. There's plenty of fatties out there that are going in there and cutting it all out. Let's get to some questions because I am running late and I can't be here for too long. So, hi, Michaela Peterson. Got low folate levels. I assume she will have to add some riboflavin and eggs. Well, she can increase her riboflavin intake and she can get some folate and all that. But the quickest way actually is you've got two methylation pathways. If you're, and this is a problem if you're eating liver and stuff like that, you're getting far more, you can, or some certain other animal foods, sometimes people can get excessive level of B12 and they can burn through folate. And it's the same thing with, the vegoons and other people like that, plant-based people. They can actually have too much folate in their diet and burn through B12 vitamins. Not enough B6 can be a problem as well in that regard. But the biggest one usually is a choline deficiency. There's actually research on this. It's a choline deficiency. Some people have very poor choline, where they can synthesize choline. They've got it like in their genetics, like I have to eat choline because my ancestors consumed quite a lot. And that may be her main reason. She may not be aware of it. And what happens is you end up using the primary methylation pathway, the folate, B12, B6, riboflavin type pathway. And as a consequence, you can really deplete some of those micronutrients. You add choline in there. So eggs will add choline or a choline supplement, and your folate, B6 folate, and also, B6 can also be overused for a whole lot of other things, including dealing with oxalate. That's another issue. And so there's a whole lot of reasons why you can end up with a low folate level. This can be complicated to try and work out exactly what's causing it. But usually the quickest way to resolve it is with a choline supplementation. It really resolves it pretty fast because then you're actually using the other methylation pathway, and you are actually the methionine one. Methionine methylation pathway requires choline. Because remember, methionine sitting here, the cycle, that's the main one, really, the methionine. I've talked about it in homocysteine. I've got a video on homocysteine which I take the piss out of Gregor, Dr. Gregor, the Vagoon, and I just tear him quadruple assholes and show how ridiculous their whole arguments are. And pretty much I cover the importance of that methionine cycle. And she's not supporting that with sufficient choline, because choline comes in that and intersects directly into that. And if you've got a genetic, like I've got MTHFR genes, I've also got a poor choline synthesis. I have to eat choline. Otherwise, my B12, folate levels and all that fall to very low levels. So I have to consume choline to support my methylation because of those genetics. She may have similar genetics. I don't know. Without a genetic test, not a. So remember, in the last 10,000 years, we're not like the tribal people in Africa. They have the original genetics. People that left Africa from the Horn of Africa, we've adapted to the domestication of plants and animals. And in the last 10,000 years, we've got a few slight variations, like the calcium issue. 24% of Europeans have it. No one has it in Africa. Zilch. So it is basically the people out of Africa that basically have these because of the domestication of animals and plants and stuff like that. So things have changed. Choline synthesis in the Han Chinese, 76%, can do it without actually having to eat it, supplement it. They have those people that have got those genes very rarely get fatty liver, because choline is used to export fat out of the liver, and actually have also some level of longevity because of that. So if she has, like I have, the complete reverse impeded, that means even worse than the Africans. We're talking about, I have to eat choline, otherwise I have a severe deficiency, and that can affect me neurologically, brain and all that as well. So that's another thing where people can have not enough issues with their neurotransmitters and a whole lot of other things, their brain chemistry, again, because they're not getting enough choline in their diet and because they have these genetic susceptibilities. So she may have that, and she may need choline to resolve her folate deficiency and whatever else. So yes, you should let her know. Being another YouTube channel, yeah, I don't really know her well, but if people know her well or whatever, pass on the message, because it can be uncomfortable. I do subscribe to her, and I do subscribe to her dad, but at the same time, I feel a bit uncomfortable, because it's another YouTuber. You're another YouTuber. You know what I mean? As a person, you could probably mention this, and she could go away and do her own research and work it out. She's a smart girl. She's probably just unaware of it, like I've been unaware of other things, which I learned from other people, like Bart about the Rattle cycle. I sort of had a suspicion that something was going wrong here and came up with a glycation theory, but, the Rattle cycle thing just worked it all out for me. So, yeah. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I think it's banned because I'm not sure what you guys are talking about. The banning. Oh, yeah. That I was talking about earlier. Yes. Oops, and zooming. And pretty much we've got 20 minutes to go. So if it's you must ask question, do put it in, because we've got about 20 minutes to go. In 20 minutes, I'm pulling the plug. Just letting you know, or 19 minutes to be more precise. Yes, that's an important one to go. Is fasting species appropriate? Always struggle with the refeed, many trips to the loo. Look, with fasting, it's there's a lot of question marks on fasting. So, is it species appropriate? Our sort of arguments are that most tribal people fasted very rarely. It's only when they couldn't get food. And that's why they really fasted, out of necessity. That's sort of the argument that's been in all the communities. Some people don't fast at all. Some people say it's not an issue, fasting. Now, populations have fasted and have had benefits from it. There is a population in the Amazon who they fast 2 days and eat on the third. And so they eat every 3 days. And it doesn't seem to have caused them any health problems. They do have some people in very old age, in sort of, close to 100 or over. So that it doesn't seem to be negative for those people, but then they could have special genetics that we may not be aware of. So it's a mixed bag. Most people, for religious reasons, have been fasting for a very long time, and some of these people, both monks and others who have fasted, have had very long lives. Some of the actual evidence seems to indicate that, but it's more in terms of food restriction. So even with fasting mimicking diets, which is still eating, but not eating a lot, for short periods of bouts here and there, seem to have similar benefits in some regards. So is it species appropriate? Who knows? That's a really hard one to answer. A good one to ask. I'll give you that, Dom. But it's a difficult one to answer when the chips are down and you have to answer something. When somebody, because most people never ask this sort of question, but I would have to say that it depends on the tribal group, their culture, and stuff like that. Now, do we have like definitive research that shows that fasting is, indicated 100%? No. There does seem to, but tribal people have had time restricted feeding, and they do get some autophagy and some benefits and stuff like that. They do get an increase when you're in a low carbohydrate state or in a low fat state. In both those states, you get an increase in uncoupling of mitochondria plus an increase in AMPK. So you're in that your body responds in a very similar way to fasting. So you get benefits. Obviously, I think the ultimate benefit of fasting, but time restricted feeding can do that as well. The ultimate benefit is probably that you take away from your digestive tract, you give it a rest. It's a bit like sleep. We sleep in the evening and give our body a bit of a rest and allow the body to clean up and itself and all that. Even digestion actually gets down regulated in the evening. So you can actually start healing and sorting out things in your gut and the rest of your body. So it makes sense to, reducing the amount of work that has to be done by certain organs would have a benefit. But whether it's like somebody could claim species appropriateness completely in that regard, that's a hard claim to make without experimental evidence. But I would generally say that some of the benefits of time restricted feeding are equivalent to fasting, because if you're as a tribal person, in the evening you've already eaten, you've slept, you've got a whole, all up probably 12 hours, you haven't touched anything. You get up in the morning, you still haven't touched anything. It's probably 18 hours that have passed by the time you hit an animal and you've actually got it. And then by the time you drag it back to to be cooked and eaten, you're probably looking at, large parts of the day where you haven't really consumed much of anything. And so would that be equivalent to a fast, a 24-hour fast where, if you're only eating once, it's nearly about 20 odd or 22 hours for some people. So do you really need to fast since you're restricting the amount of activity within your gut, your digestive tract, for most of the day anyway. A fast would only add additional length of time, in a sense. So, yeah, it's food for thought. Now, obviously, if you fast for 3 days, you're going to get much higher levels of autophagy. That means clearing out the waste stuff in your cells. But I'll argue it differently. For a modern human, that's a benefit, because for a modern human, they've been doing a lot of things inappropriately for a very, very long time. So you will have far more derangements, far more senescence, far more junk inside your cells and all that. Now, if you're a tribal person from birth to death and you are on a species appropriate diet, your insulin to glucagon is running at about 1.3, maybe at most 1.5 when you have a big meal. So generally speaking, you're running much lower levels of inflammation or any other markers. You're going to get some benefit from that. I would say from if you're a non-tribal person, but a tribal person, probably not. Because you're already probably got well over 20 hours to basically have some low-level autophagy, and that could be enough for you because you're creating very little, no Randall cycle activation, very little. You don't live in an environment where it's much more toxic, exposed to PCBs and heavy metals and all sorts of other stuff. So you're in a really good environment. You're earthing yourself, so you're pulling up ions, negative ions, basically electrons from the ground, and you basically, what is an antioxidant? An electron donor. So if you're you've got more electrons to protons, you're going to have much more stable tissue, and you're going to have much less oxidative stress in your body as a consequence of walking around barefoot and sleeping with you connected to Earth, to Mother Earth. So in that regard, your level of oxidative stress, your level of cleanup is going to be vastly reduced compared to. So does a tribal person really need to fast? Very little, because they've got very little to deal with. But modern humans, it's a different thing altogether. Modern people basically have a lot of damage. And so for them, it's probably more beneficial. But then they can do it different ways, because you do have issues with, if you do it for too long, muscle wastage, loss. If you do fasting continuously, could that be a problem long term? To be discussed, all these issues, all these controversial issues in my upcoming fasting video and a few other things related to it. So, yeah, and then you've got a situation, your body's still working even when you're fasting, so you still need, water-soluble vitamins. Remember, they only stay in the body for about 3 days, a number of them. There are some that stay longer. I mean, B6 stays up to 30 days, 33, potentially, theoretically. Pantothenic acid stores to some extent, so it's, but it can deplete quite rapidly under certain circumstances. Then you've got B12 and folate. They can store to some extent in the body, particularly in the liver. So there are variations within different B vitamins, but they still are required as cofactors for a lot of the enzymatic processes in the body. So those enzymes require those things then to do their catalytic activities, break down things and put things back together. So that's the other side. If you don't have enough of these cofactors because you're fasting continuously, could that be a problem? Nowadays, in the modern era, we can biohack that. We can throw in supplements. We can do that. We can consume trace minerals. We can take B complex vitamins. We can do a lot of things that obviously a tribal person couldn't do. So there's a lot of nuancing there. So in my sort of personal opinion, I think that fasting is neither appropriate but neither contraindicated, because the window of eating is much smaller for tribal people. So they do have, it's not fasting really, but it's time restricted feeding, but it's similar to long fasts, but they don't need to do as much to get the benefits. Modern people probably do need, so it's probably indicated more for modern people, less indicated for tribal people, because, for them, there is a food security issue, getting enough. We don't have that problem. Many of us probably need to lose a few kilos. So it's a bit different in that regard. So, yeah, I hope that sort of gives you a sort of a more comprehensive, it's neither one or the other, because there is a partial level of what we call AMPK activation. All the things that you get from a long fast do happen also within time restricted feeding, but at a lower grade, at a lower gradient. You get an amplification at a higher gradient. Modern people probably need it at that higher gradient because they've done far more damage. Tribal people, far less. The constant everyday small amounts that they're getting is probably more than enough to fix the problems that they've caused, because they're very small and minimal, those causal problems that they have in there. Some of the small grade inflammation, small grade oxidation that happens just from normal living as a tribal person, just metabolizing, oxidizing food in the mitochondria creates some level of oxidative stress when you eat. But then you've actually got intracellular antioxidants like glutathione, superoxide dismutase, that are catalase that are upregulated because the insulin to glucagon ratio keeps insulin tempered and, within a measurable bound by glucagon, because of the diet. And that makes that difference in terms of the way things work, and that you're not suppressing these important intracellular things that you're earthing, or that combination. You don't need as much. Whereas Westerner, far more, so yeah. Oh, I love hard. Thanks, mate. So you must have enjoyed the long-winded, well, somebody did at least. Now, foods do a free form on iHerb. Is it okay? I don't know. I've actually asked them to provide me with information, but they haven't actually provided me with information. With the other companies, I'm less problematic. They'll just provide me the information and say, this is how we manufacture it. This is how we do it. You're welcome, Dom. But I don't know about Now Foods. I know Alex has tried it and he said it doesn't work as well for him. Is it a placebo effect on his part? Or is it really that there are other things in there that shouldn't be in there? I don't know. But I have put a couple of other brands in the actual that I've actually ordered and use and seem to be fine. And so I've put those in. I do want to actually get some feedback from Alex, because he's a very sulfur sensitive person. So he notices the differences between the different types of taurine brands. So it'll be interesting to get a bit of his feedback. But I couldn't tell you because I've never tried it, and I've never got any feedback from them, because there are slightly different manufacturing processes to produce taurine. And that's the things that I sort of ask from these companies. Some are willing to tell me their manufacturing processes, others are not. And they're one of them that are not willing to tell me. And usually that for me indicates maybe not. But I can't say with surety. I can't. Is Brazilian beef good quality? Got sirloin steaks for $9 per kilo here in Bahrain. Seems so cheap. Yeah, because of the BRICS nations being part of that, and also because there is less tax. Because remember, just because there's some same stuff you ought to buy it in Europe or in some other country, or like in the US, you'd be paying more. There is a bit of, tax on imports where there's competition. For them, they just want it as cheap as possible for the local market, for the people there. So it usually is cheaper in the Middle East for that reason. They make plenty of money from oil, so it doesn't affect their trade balance, so to speak, is what I'm saying. So they can actually import without putting tariffs. So yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah, look, Brazilian beef is pretty good quality. So is Paraguay, Uruguay, those sort of areas. The soils in those southern areas, they're rocky, rugged sort of soils. There's better quality minerals, and a lot of it is volcanic. So the soils are rich in trace minerals and all sorts of things. So the animal flesh will be way healthier. Also, some of the plants that grow on those sort of surfaces are these really hardy green types, and they tend to have a higher level of omega-3s. They also have certain level of vitamin D as well, and a few other things that make them a bit better quality. So if I was buying, I'd definitely be buying that stuff than buying from other sources, including Australia. If I was in Bahrain and I had Australian, American, and Brazilian, I'd buy the Brazilian personally, even if it was a bit more expensive for those reasons that I just gave you outlined about the soil. If it was from Tasmania and it was from some of the like lamb from the Central Highlands, which I know is really has these sort of properties, the soil is really fantastic in that regard. Yeah, I'd definitely. The only problem with Tasmanian soils, the one weakness is iodine. They're iodine deficient, the soils down here, so it's a problem. It's probably why there's a bit more rampant hypothyroidism in Tasmania amongst the general population, that is. So, and there's a bit more encouragement even from the doctors down here to basically use iodinized salt. Not everyone does, but because of the salt madness as well, that's the other side. Anyway, here's Simon. Is the nutrient type 2 diabetes needs the most? I heard kibble foods deplete. Yep, they do. There are two pathways, enzymatic pathways. Protein and fat only require about 50%, half the amount. So they only go through one enzymatic pathway. The other, glucose, goes through two. That's the difference. And that is why there is a bigger requirement. So, well, it's through glycolysis there's a bigger requirement. Right down to pyruvate, you need far more. Anyway, so yes, and so a high carbohydrate diet would deplete thiamine, will use more. So, a zero plant-based diet of whatever sort of style I'm making will only be using half the amount, or have half the amount of requirements. Real requirements, not the RDI requirements, but real requirements. Now, there are some people, for genetic reasons, another because of lifestyle and all that, may have severe depletion and may have affected some of the homeostasis of certain gene expression and stuff like that. And those people seem, when you megadose them on thiamine, it seems to resolve their problems. Now, I know Elliot has done a lot of work in that area, and he's actually had some success in that area. Now, I do sometimes criticize Elliot that he sort of has this sort of blanket approach on thiamine. But he's a smart guy. I do agree with most of the stuff. He's got some really good stuff out there. It's just one thing that I sort of go, well, not everyone needs this sort of level. No, we can get enough from Piggy. Humanity has been getting enough thiamine for centuries. It's not as if we became all of a sudden unable to get enough. It's really just a modern era that's deranged a lot of people. Now, there may be more people that go to him because of that, and he may have a bias in that regard. But, there's obviously a number of people that have issues and need to resolve it with megadosing of thiamine for some period of time to correct that problem. Some people that don't have those genetic reasons or those underlying issues, if they do high methionine, and I've known some of them who have approached me, have said it didn't work for me. I tried the thiamine approach and actually I got worse. So again, the overvitaminosis, we need to be very careful about this stuff. It's not for everyone. So that's just my sort of little take on it in that regard. Oh, about Brazil. Yes. Anyway, I'll just quickly go through, see if there's any. Well, Sammy loves half the price for the Australian in New Zealand. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I would say, yeah, I'd be buying the Brazilian stuff as well if I was there. Question, is there any evidence that autophagy targets damaged or unnecessary cells like loose skin? Well, look, autophagy is the cleaning out of junk in the cell. So as general living will increase the amount of, fragments of, proteins that need to be cleaned out of the cell and other stuff as well. And so autophagy sort of helps that. Now, if you've got really, really good mitochondria that are functioning really, really well, generally speaking, your body's able to clear out a lot of that sort of stuff without requiring to fast for days upon end. But that's somebody that's extremely super healthy with no problems whatsoever from birth, and they've been on a species-appropriate diet from birth. So they'll have very little. The just general damage, general stuff will actually be cleaned up. There'll be sufficient energy to be able to do that. It's really that we do autophagy to basically just give the body a rest to be able to do it, clear out this sort of stuff, to prioritize the energy less for cellular, for basically digestion, and more to basically do other work throughout the body, accumulated damage and stuff like that. So it does have a benefit in that regard. Now, with loose skin, yeah, it can help, but it takes some time. The actual best way to deal with loose skin, I've always said, is to eat more protein and to lift weights and stuff like that to build more muscularity. And that will basically resolve most of the loose skin over time far better than fasting. Fasting can, but it takes much longer and it's a much slower process, where building up more muscularity around the body seems to actually deal with the problem a hell of a lot faster. And you can see it in bodybuilders. They can beef up and cut and all that continuously and don't end up with a whole lot of loose skin. So that should be a bit of a lesson. Anyway, I think extremely catabolic states are not always the best approaches. Body composition, through getting sufficient protein and fat, usually tend to basically sort these things out in the long run. Are we struggling? Oh, trouble walking? Was it the sort of the liquid variety? Dean, was it the liquid variety? Anyway, bad boy. Now go and beat yourself, and then do a 1,000 Hail Marys and whatever else you want to do. Thanks, mate, as always. And the heart. I got to put that up there, definitely. I've placed an order on Amazon USA, natural taurine. Thanks. Yep, not a problem. Yeah, he doesn't supply enough. That's the problem with him. I need to get him to convince to do a deal. But anyway, we'll see what happens. Meat is painfully expensive here, Harry. But again, I'm from Ireland. That's true. That is true. You are. And so things are a bit different over there. Yes. And I've actually gone over my limit. But that's normal. It's the Harry Serpanos show after all. 9 minutes over the time that I was supposed to. Love me protein, me too. Anyway, I'm going to do a runner. In 4 hours' time, there'll be the Eurasia live stream. So that'll be on in the not quite close. Need to move that other crap from there. But anyway, that is it, guys. So I'm pulling the plug. I'm leaving. And I will... Is he physically healthy in the long run? Depends what he's eating. So depends what he's eating. Look, I'll give you an example, Dom. It's a guy who was a bodybuilder, a British bloke. I forget his name, but he got, at 95, he decided to go more plant-based. He was eating a lot of animal foods up until then and doing bodybuilding. And I saw him in a chat, in a TED talk, and he was quite robust in his 90s. And then at 95, he decided to go into doing cardio, of all things. Gave up on bodybuilding, went and did cardio, went more plant-based. Guess what? 3 years later, he was dead. So I'll let that be a lesson to you. I've got less concerns. I think Sean, as he gets older, he'll cut back. Obviously, you could do a bit of a biohack, lower lactate levels and lower oxidative stress in the muscles, and have better muscle recovery by putting in a bit of taurine 90 minutes before you do strength exercises, because that actually improves and reduces the deleterious effects. So some bodybuilders are well aware of it and doing it. I don't know whether Sean knows about it, but he does eat some fish and all that, so he's probably getting and quite a lot of animal food, so he should be getting quite a bit of taurine in his diet from all the food that he consumes. Time will tell. Time will tell. But this other guy seemed to do pretty well. But then there are other factors that can be at play. Excessive amounts of physical activity long term do have their wear and tear consequences. Obviously, that other guy, the British guy, he'd actually eased off. He wasn't doing that sort of, as he got into his 60s and 70s and all that, he sort of eased off quite a bit. He still did a bit, but not a lot of training. He just, in the end, he sort of decided to do something really weird. So yeah. is what it is. But yeah, it's a hard one to answer for one single person. You're welcome, Johnny. Sammy, as always, thanks, mate. Thanks, Richard. And I'm out of here. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the support. Appreciate the time. You know, because the channel, the live stream doesn't work without you guys. And so I always thank you guys for being here and supporting the live stream, because without you guys asking the questions, participating, throwing your 2-bit in the channel, you know, it doesn't work. You know, live streams don't work. So I do appreciate your time. It's 3.5 hours, and a number of you people have been here for the last 3.5 hours, and that's a lot of commitment and support for me, and I really appreciate it. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for being here, for the amount of time and spending some time with Uncle Harry, as Hello Kitty calls me. Anyway, take care, guys. Thanks, and see yous. And we are out of here.